Sometimes the hardest part of losing someone isn't saying goodbye. It's discovering you never really knew them at all. For 52-year-old Mick Halden, that discovery came in a dusty garage 3 days after his father's funeral. He showed up to help his brother and sister clear out the old place, bringing along his golden retriever, Duke, and not much else. The family hadn't been close in years. The garage was full of forgotten things. 2 cars hidden under canvas tarps, tools rusted with time, and a locked drawer built into the wall that nobody knew existed. Inside that drawer, Mick found something that changed everything they thought they knew about their father. What was it? Before we continue with Mick's story, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The August heat pressed down on the gravel driveway like a weight, shimmering in waves that made the old homestead look like a mirage at the end of the overgrown lane. Mick Halden sat behind the wheel of his Ford pickup for a long moment before killing the engine, staring at the property where he'd grown up but hadn't visited in nearly 3 years. Beside him, Duke lifted his golden head from the passenger seat and whined softly, sensing his owner's hesitation. "I know, boy," Mick said quietly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "I'm not thrilled about this either." The property looked smaller than he remembered. The main house, a 2-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a sagging front porch, sat back from the road surrounded by untended flower beds that his mother had once kept immaculate. That was before she left, before everything fell apart. The yard was overgrown now, tall grass and wild flowers, competing with weeds, and the whole place had that abandoned look of a home that had been lived in but not loved for a very long time. His father had died 4 days ago. Heart attack in his sleep, the doctor said. Quick and painless. Mick supposed that was the best anyone could hope for at 78, but it didn't make the reality any easier to swallow. Robert James Halden had been a quiet man, not given to displays of emotion or lengthy conversations. After Mick's mother left 33 years ago, his father had retreated even further into himself, becoming more shadow than substance, more absence than presence. Mick was 52 now, divorced 6 years, and living alone except for Duke. His daughter Emily was 24 and living in Portland, building her own life as a graphic designer. They talked every Sunday, which was more than Mick had done with his own father in the last decade. He worked as a regional freight dispatcher for a trucking company, decent pay and predictable hours, and he liked the solitude of it. Just him, a computer screen, and a headset. Duke came to the office with him most days, which the company allowed because therapy dogs were good for morale. The sound of tires on gravel made him look up. A black Lexus SUV pulled in behind his truck, and Mick felt his shoulders tense. Carl, his older brother, stepped out of the vehicle with the confident bearing of a man who'd made a success of himself and wanted everyone to know it. At 56, Carl looked good. Trim, well-dressed even in casual khakis and a polo shirt, his hair gray at the temples, but thick and styled. He owned a real estate development company in the city, building strip malls and housing developments, and he'd done well enough to have a vacation home in Florida and a boat he barely used. "You're late," Carl said, though without much heat. That was just Carl's way. Always needing to be in control, always needing to establish the pecking order. "Traffic," Mick lied, climbing out of the truck. Duke jumped down after him, tail wagging tentatively. Carl eyed the dog with barely concealed distaste. "You brought the mutt?" "Duke goes where I go," Mick said evenly. It wasn't worth arguing about. A third vehicle approached, a silver Honda sedan that Mick recognized as belonging to their younger sister. Jennifer was 48, a middle school English teacher with 2 kids in college and a husband who worked for the state. She'd always been the peacekeeper in the family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts and keep everyone connected. It was a losing battle, had been for years, but Jennifer never stopped trying. She got out of her car with a tired smile, her face lined with grief but still warm. "Hey, you two. Glad you could both make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Carl said dryly. "Nothing says quality time like cleaning out a dead man's garage." Jennifer flinched. "Carl." "What?" "It's the truth. Dad's gone. The house is already cleared out, and we're here to deal with the last bit so we can put this place on the market." He looked at the property with a businessman's appraisal. "Should get a decent price. Land alone is worth something." Mick felt a familiar tightness in his chest. This was how it had always been. Carl seeing everything in terms of value and profit, Jennifer trying to find meaning and connection, and Mick caught in the middle, saying little but feeling everything. They were strangers who happened to share blood, brought together by obligation rather than affection. "The funeral was nice," Jennifer offered, clearly trying to steer toward safer ground. "A lot of people showed up." "Dad knew a lot of people," Mick said. "He just didn't talk to most of them." That was true enough. Robert Halden had been a fixture in town, worked at the hardware store for 40 years, went to church sporadically, showed up at community events when required. But he'd never been what you'd call social. After their mother left, after Patricia Halden walked out when Mick was 19 and Jennifer was only 15, their father had become even more withdrawn. He went to work, he came home, he kept to himself. The family had fractured that day, and it had never healed. Carl had been 23 when it happened, already out of the house and starting his business. He'd taken their mother's abandonment hard, channeling his anger into ambition, building his company brick by brick as if success could fill the hole she'd left. Jennifer had tried to hold things together, but she was just a kid herself. And Mick, caught in the middle at 19, had watched his father retreat into silence and decided that maybe isolation was the safest option after all. They stood in the driveway for a moment, none of them eager to take the first step toward the garage. It sat off to the side of the property, maybe 50 yards from the main house, a weathered wooden structure that looked older than the house itself. The paint had long since peeled away to bare gray wood, and the metal roof was streaked with rust. But it was solid. Their father had maintained it even when he let everything else slide. "Did you ever come out here?" Jennifer asked, looking at the garage. "When Dad was alive, I mean. Did you visit?" Mick shook his head. "Not for years. Work keeps me busy." It was a weak excuse, and they all knew it. The truth was that coming back to this place hurt too much. It reminded him of everything they'd lost, everything that had fallen apart. His own divorce had only reinforced the lesson. People left, relationships ended, and the best you could do was protect yourself from the fallout. "He called me sometimes," Jennifer said softly. "Not often. Maybe every few months. We'd talk about the weather, about my kids, about nothing really. He never said much." "That was Dad," Carl said, pulling keys from his pocket. "Man of few words and even fewer emotions." Mick wanted to defend their father, but couldn't find the words. Robert Halden had been distant, that was true, but Mick had always sensed that beneath the silence there was something else. Not coldness exactly, but maybe resignation. A man who'd made his peace with disappointment and decided that keeping people at arm's length was easier than risking more pain. Duke pressed against Mick's leg, and he reached down to stroke the dog's head. Duke had been his constant companion since the divorce, a gift from Emily who'd recognized that her father needed something to care for, something that wouldn't leave. The golden retriever had a calm temperament and an intuitive sense for when Mick needed comfort. Right now, Duke seemed to understand that this place, these people, this whole situation was difficult. "I already came out yesterday and removed the padlock," Carl said, jangling the keys. "Figured we could get started today and maybe finish by evening. Sooner we get this done, sooner we can move forward." "Move forward," Jennifer repeated quietly. "That's one way to put it." They walked toward the garage, feet crunching on gravel and then on packed dirt. The property was on the edge of town, rural enough that the nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. There, Father had liked the isolation, or at least that's what Mick had always assumed. Now he wondered if maybe his father had needed it, needed the space to be alone with whatever thoughts or regrets he carried. The garage doors were tall and wide, designed for vehicles, with a smaller access door cut into the right panel. Carl had removed the padlock from the access door, and now he pulled it open with a creak of old hinges. The smell hit them immediately. Dust, motor oil, old wood, and something else underneath it all. Time, maybe. Or neglect. Jesus, Carl muttered. When's the last time anyone opened this place? Years, Jennifer said. I remember Dad mentioning once that he kept his tools out here, but I never actually saw inside. Mick peered into the dimness. Light filtered through gaps in the roof and a single dirty window, revealing a space larger than he'd expected. The floor was concrete, oil-stained and dusty. Workbenches lined two walls, covered with tools and equipment, all of it arranged with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent decades working with his hands. A pegboard held more tools, wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers, all hung in neat rows. And in the center of the space, side by side, were two large shapes covered with canvas tarps. Cars. Well, Carl said, stepping inside. Guess we know where Dad's money went. Mick followed his brother into the garage, Duke hesitant at the threshold. The dog whined again but didn't follow, instead sitting in the doorway with his ears back. That was unusual. Duke typically stayed close, especially in unfamiliar places. It's okay, boy, Mick said. Stay. The garage was cooler than outside but airless, the heat trapped beneath the metal roof making it stuffy and close. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light, and cobwebs stretched across corners and beams. A calendar hung on one wall, yellowed with age, permanently fixed on March 1993. 32 years ago. Mick had been 20 that year, working at a lumber yard and trying to figure out what to do with his life. Jennifer walked along the workbench, her fingers trailing through the dust. Look at all this. He really used this space. The tools were old but well-maintained, clean and organized. There were coffee cans full of screws and nails, sorted by size. Manuals and parts catalogs stacked neatly. An oil-stained rag folded over the edge of the bench. It had the feel of a place that had been used regularly, not abandoned. What do you think is under the tarps? Jennifer asked. Carl was already reaching for the nearest one. Let's find out. He grabbed the canvas and pulled, and the tarp slid off with a whisper of fabric, revealing the vehicle beneath. All three of them stopped and stared. It was a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, cherry red with chrome bumpers that still gleamed despite the years. The paint was immaculate, the body pristine, and even through the dust on the windows, Mick could see that the interior was cream leather, perfectly preserved. Holy hell, Carl breathed. Their father had driven a pickup truck for as long as Mick could remember, an old Ford Ranger that he'd maintained meticulously, but never replaced. Robert Holden wasn't a car enthusiast. He'd never mentioned classic vehicles, never gone to car shows, never expressed any interest in restoration or collecting. Yet here was a museum-quality Impala hidden in his garage. Jennifer moved to the second top. Let's see what else he had. She pulled, and the second car emerged, a 1972 Plymouth Duster, powder blue with black racing stripes. Like the Impala, it was in extraordinary condition, the paint gleaming, the chrome perfect. This doesn't make sense, Mick said. Dad never talked about cars. Why would he have these? Carl walked around the Impala, inspecting it with the eye of someone mentally calculating value. These are worth money. Serious money. A pristine '67 Impala. Could be $30,000, $40,000. The Duster probably less, but still. That's not the point, Jennifer said. The point is, why did Dad have them? Where did they come from? Mick moved closer to the duster, peering through the driver's side window. The interior was clean, the seats showing wear, but not damage. And there, tucked under the sun visor, he could see the corner of what looked like registration papers. "There's paperwork in this one," he said. Carl immediately went to the Impala and tried the door. It opened smoothly, hinges well-oiled despite the years. He reached in and grabbed the registration from under the visor, holding it up to the light filtering through the window. "Registered to Robert James Halden," he read. "Current tags. He's been keeping these registered." "Why would he do that if he wasn't driving them?" Jennifer asked. That was the question. Registration cost money, and their father hadn't been rich. He'd lived simply, saved carefully. Spending money to keep two classic cars registered when they sat unused in a locked garage made no sense, unless they hadn't been unused. Mick walked slowly around both vehicles, looking carefully. The tires were old but not dry-rotted. The batteries might be dead, but the cars themselves looked ready to drive. And there, on the concrete floor beneath each vehicle, he noticed something. No dust. The floor directly under the cars was cleaner than the surrounding concrete, as if the vehicles had been moved recently. Within the last few weeks, maybe. "Someone's been driving these," he said. Carl looked up sharply. "What?" "Look at the floor. No dust directly underneath. These cars have been moved recently." Jennifer crouched down to look. "You're right, but who? Dad couldn't have been driving them. He could barely walk the last few months." That was true. Their father's health had been failing. Diabetes, heart problems, general old age. He'd still driven his pickup truck into town for groceries, but carefully and not far. The idea of him taking these classic cars out for joyrides was absurd. Maybe he had someone helping him maintain them, Carl suggested. A mechanic or something. Then why keep them locked away? Mick countered. Why the secrecy? They stood in silence, all three of them looking at the cars. Duke whined from the doorway, still refusing to enter, and Mick felt a prickling awareness that something about this place wasn't right. It wasn't the cars themselves. They were beautiful, valuable, surprising. But there was something else here, something just out of reach. "We need to search this place," Jennifer said quietly. "Really search it. Dad was hiding something." Carl bristled. He was a private man. That doesn't mean... He had two pristine classic cars locked in a garage nobody knew about, Jennifer interrupted. Cars he kept registered and apparently maintained. That's not privacy, Carl. That's secrecy. And Dad wasn't the type for secrets. Except he was, Mick thought. Or at least he'd become that type after their mother left. Robert Halden had built walls around himself, brick by brick, year by year, until he was unreachable. Maybe these cars were part of that. Another wall, another secret. "Fine," Carl said. "We'll look around. But let's be systematic about it. We've got a lot to go through." They began with the workbenches, methodically checking drawers and shelves. Most contained exactly what you'd expect. Tools, parts, supplies. Carl found a cash box with maybe $200 in small bills. Jennifer discovered a collection of old keys, none labeled. Mick went through the manuals and found maintenance logs tucked inside one of them. The logs were handwritten in their father's neat, precise script. Dates going back years, oil changes, tire rotations, battery replacements, both cars meticulously documented. And then Mick noticed something strange. The entries stopped being about maintenance and became something else. March 15th, 2015, saw her today. EM looking well. June 3rd, 2016, EM's birthday. Can't tell them yet. October 8th, 2018, long drive. She's growing up, looks more like her every year. EM. Someone identified only by initials. Someone their father saw regularly. Someone whose birthday he remembered. Someone growing up. A child. Mick felt his heart rate pick up. "I found something," Carl and Jennifer came over immediately. Mick showed them the log, pointing to the strange entries mixed in with the mechanical ones. "EM," Jennifer read. "Who's EM?" "I don't know," Mick said. "But Dad was tracking this person. These entries go on for years." They flipped through more pages. The pattern continued. Regular visits, cryptic notes, obvious affection. And then, near the back of the log, Mick found mileage records. "Every other Sunday," he said, showing them. "Look. Every other Sunday, consistent mileage. 47 miles there, 47 miles back." "He was driving to see someone," Jennifer said. "Every 2 weeks. For years." Carl frowned. "Maybe a friend. Or—" He stopped, and they all thought the same thing simultaneously. Their father, driving to see someone regularly. Someone he wrote about with clear affection. Someone whose birthday he remembered. Another woman. "After all these years," Jennifer said softly. "Maybe he found someone. Maybe he was happy." Mick wanted to believe that. His father deserved happiness, deserved companionship after so many years alone. But something about the entries felt wrong. The tone was regretful, almost sad. Can't tell them yet. Why couldn't he tell his children he'd found someone? Why the secrecy? "We need to find out who EM is," Carl said, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by curiosity. "There has to be more information here somewhere." Duke barked sharply from the doorway, making all three of them jump. The dog was staring at the back corner of the garage, tail stiff, ears forward. "What is it, boy?" Mick called. Duke barked again, insistent. Mick walked over to where the dog was focused. The back corner, behind the Impala's rear bumper. Nothing there but shadows and dust. Except there was something. A gap in the wall, hidden behind an old toolbox that could be slid aside. And in that gap, Mick could just make out the edge of something metal. A drawer. Built into the wall itself, concealed and locked, with a keyhole that gleamed dully in the dim light. His hands were shaking as he pulled the toolbox aside fully, revealing the drawer completely. It was maybe 2 feet wide and a foot tall, solid steel, with that single keyhole in the center. "Found something," he called out, his voice strange in his own ears. Carl and Jennifer crowded close as Mick examined the drawer. It was old, the metal spotted with rust in places, but the lock looked newer. Recently replaced, maybe. "Can we force it open?" Carl asked. "We could," Mick said, "but maybe we don't have to." He thought about the ring of unlabeled keys Jennifer had found earlier. One of them might fit, or... He remembered the maintenance log, remembered seeing something tucked into the spine of the binder. Back at the workbench, he opened the log carefully and shook it. 3 keys fell out, held together by a twist of wire. 2 were car keys, obvious from their shape. The third was smaller, brass, old but well-maintained. "Try this," he said, returning to the hidden drawer. The key slid in smoothly, turned with a click that sounded very loud in the quiet garage, and the drawer rolled open on smooth rails despite its age. Inside, they found the truth that would change everything. The drawer wasn't deep, maybe 6 inches, but it was packed carefully. A manila folder lay on top, thick with documents. Beneath it, Mick could see the corner of a small velvet box and what looked like a stack of photographs bound with a rubber band. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Duke's panting from the doorway and the distant buzz of cicadas outside in the August heat. Mick's hands hesitated over the contents. This was private, clearly. His father had gone to considerable effort to hide this drawer, to keep whatever was inside secret. Opening it felt like a violation, like crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed, but his father was dead, and whatever secrets Robert Halden had kept, whatever life he'd lived beyond their knowing, it was part of his story. Part of their story, too, whether they'd known it or not. He reached in and carefully lifted out the manila folder. It was old, the edges worn soft with handling, but the contents inside felt substantial. Carl leaned in close, his businessman's instincts clearly overriding any sense of discretion. Jennifer stood back slightly, her arms wrapped around herself as if protecting against a chill despite the stuffy heat. Mick opened the folder. The first thing he saw was a birth certificate. Official. Stamped. Real. He read the name at the top, and his vision seemed to narrow, the edges going dark as his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Emma Rose Halden, born April 23, 1974. Father, Robert James Halden. Mother, Evelyn Marie Strand. Mick felt the floor shift beneath his feet, though nothing had actually moved. 51 years ago. Emma would be 51 years old now. Older than Jennifer, younger than Carl, right in the middle, like Mick himself. "Let me see that," Carl said, his voice sharp. He grabbed the folder, his eyes scanning the document with increasing intensity. This can't be right." "What is it?" Jennifer asked, moving closer. "A birth certificate," Carl said flatly. "For someone named Emma Rose Halden. Dad's listed as the father." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Jennifer took the certificate with shaking hands. Mick watched her face go pale as she read, her lips moving soundlessly as she processed the information. Evelyn Marie Strand, EM, the initials from the maintenance log. "He had another child," Jennifer whispered. "Dad had another daughter." "We don't know that," Carl said, but his voice lacked conviction. "This could be, I don't know, a mistake or a forgery or—" "Why would Dad keep a forged birth certificate hidden in a locked drawer?" Mick asked quietly. Carl had no answer to that. Mick reached back into the drawer and pulled out the velvet box. It was the kind that held jewelry, small and elegant despite its age. He opened it with a sense of inevitability, already knowing what he'd find. A wedding ring. Not their mother's ring. Patricia's had been simple gold, thin and plain. This was different, more ornate, with a small diamond set in white gold, and inside the band, an inscription, E+R, always. E and R, Evelyn and Robert. "He was married to her," Jennifer said, staring at the ring. "Before Mom." "After Mom left, maybe," Carl countered. Or he stopped, doing the math the same way Mick was doing it. Emma, born in April 1974. Their parents had married in December 1974, 8 months later. And Carl had been born June 1969, 5 years before Emma, which meant their father had been with Evelyn while he was married to their mother, or just before. The timeline was murky, but the implications were clear. Robert Halden had lived 2 lives. Mick pulled out the stack of photographs, his hands steady now despite the shock flooding his system. The rubber band broke when he tried to remove it, old and brittle, and the photos fanned out in his hands. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, blonde curls and a gap-toothed smile, holding a stuffed rabbit. The photo was dated on the back, Emma, 1976. Another photo. The same girl at maybe 7, missing her front teeth, wearing a school uniform. First day of 3rd grade, someone had written on the back. More photos. Emma at 10, Emma at 15, awkward and gangly in the way teenagers are. Emma at 20, beautiful in a high school cap and gown. Emma at 30, more mature, confident. And in several of the photos, standing beside her, or kneeling next to her, or holding her hand, was their father. Robert Halden, looking younger than Mick remembered him, but unmistakably him. His father's face, his father's smile, a smile Mick realized he'd never seen directed at himself or his siblings. Their father had always been so serious, so distant, but in these photos, he was different, happy. "He knew her," Jennifer said, looking at the photos over Mick's shoulder. He was in her life. That's him, that's Dad, but she couldn't finish. None of them could find the words. The photos spanned decades, Emma at various ages, their father aging alongside her. The most recent photo looked to be from a few years ago, Emma in her late 40s, standing in front of a modest house with flower boxes in the windows, their father beside her with his arm around her shoulders. Both of them smiling. Mick turned the photo over. Someone had written, Emma's new place in 2019. 6 years ago. Their father had been to Emma's house 6 years ago, had stood there with her, had posed for this photo, had been part of her life in a way he'd never been part of theirs. Not really. I don't understand, Carl said, and for the first time since arriving, his confident facade cracked. He looked lost, confused, younger than his 56 years. Why would he hide this? If he had another daughter, why wouldn't he tell us? Maybe he was ashamed, Jennifer offered quietly. For 30 years. Carl's voice rose. He kept a secret for 30 years. We had a sister and he never... He stopped, turned away, his hands clenched into fists. Mick understood the anger. He felt it too, a hot coal burning in his chest. But beneath the anger was something else. Grief. Not for his father's death, which he'd already mourned, but for something larger. For the father they'd never really known. For the relationship they'd never had. For a sister they'd never met. He looked back into the drawer. There was more. He could see papers beneath where the photos had been. Carefully, almost reluctantly, he reached in and pulled out a bundle of letters tied with a blue ribbon. The envelopes were addressed to Robert Halden at a P.O. box in town. The return address was simply E. Halden, Millbrook. No street address, just the town name. Millbrook. Mick knew it vaguely. A small town about an hour away, maybe 45 miles. The mileage in the maintenance log, 47 miles each way. His father had been driving to Millbrook every other Sunday for years. To see Emma, to maintain this secret relationship with a daughter none of them had known about. We need to read these, Mick said, holding up the letters. No, Carl said sharply. Those are private. Dad's private correspondence. We have no right... He's dead, Carl, Mick interrupted, his voice hard. And apparently he had a whole other life we knew nothing about. I think we have a right to understand why. Maybe he had his reasons, Jennifer said softly. Maybe there's an explanation. Then let's find it, Mick said, because right now, all I know is that our father hid a daughter from us for 5 decades, and I want to know why. He untied the ribbon and pulled out the first letter. The handwriting was feminine, neat, the ink faded but still legible. The date at the top read, June 15th, 1992. Dear Dad, it began. Mick's throat tightened. Dad. Emma had called him Dad, had known him as her father, while Carl, Jennifer, and Mick had grown up with a distant, emotionally unavailable man who seemed to barely notice them. He read silently for a moment, then began reading aloud. Thank you for the birthday money. You didn't have to, but I appreciate it. College is expensive and every bit helps. Mom says hi. She understands you can't visit as often now, but we both know you're there for us when it matters. He paused, looked up at his siblings. She knew about us. Emma knew she had half-siblings. Keep reading, Jennifer said. I know this situation isn't easy for anyone, the letter continued. I've always understood that you have another family, that you made choices a long time ago that you have to live with. I don't blame you, Dad. I really don't. You've always been there for me, always made me feel loved and wanted. That's more than a lot of kids have. The letter went on, talking about Emma's classes, her plans to become a nurse, her mother's health. It was warm, affectionate, and achingly normal. A daughter writing to her father. Mick set down the first letter and picked up another, dated 5 years later. Mom passed away last week. this one began. "The funeral was small but nice. Thank you for coming, even though you couldn't stay long. I know that was hard for you. I wish things were different, but they are what they are." Another letter from 2005. "I got the job at St. Anne's Medical Center here in Millbrook, head nurse in the cardiac unit. I keep thinking you'd be proud. You always said I had a gift for taking care of people." And another from 2015. "I saw you yesterday at the graduation. I was in the back in the balcony. I saw you with them, your other children, your grandchildren. They seem happy. You seem happy with them. I'm glad. I really am. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if we could all just be a family together, but I know that's not possible. Some things can't be undone." Mick's hands trembled as he set down the letters. Emma had been there, at Carl's daughter's graduation 8 years ago. She'd watched from a distance, hidden, seeing her father with his other family, the family that didn't know she existed. "This is—" Jennifer couldn't finish, tears streaming down her face. "Insane," Carl supplied. "This is insane. How could he do this to us? To her? To everyone?" "I don't think he knew how to fix it," Mick said quietly. He was thinking of his own divorce, his own failures, the way mistakes compounded over time until they became impossible to undo. "I think he made a choice a long time ago and then he was stuck with it." "That's not an excuse," Carl said. "No," Mick agreed. "It's not. But maybe it's an explanation." Duke barked again from the doorway, more insistent this time. Mick looked over and saw the dog pacing, agitated in a way that was unusual for his normally calm companion. "We need to decide what to do," Jennifer said, wiping her eyes. "Do we try to find her? Emma, do we— I don't even know what we do." "We finish going through this drawer," Carl said, his voice steadying. "Then we decide." Mick reached back into the drawer. His fingers brushed against one more item tucked at the very back. An envelope, unsealed, with "To my children" written on the front in their father's handwriting. He pulled it out slowly, knowing that whatever was inside would change everything even more than it already had. "There's a letter," he said, "from Dad. To us." All three of them stared at the envelope. Outside, the cicadas had started up again, their drone filling the silence. Duke whined softly, and somewhere far away, a crow called. Mick opened the envelope and began to read their father's final words. The letter was written in their father's careful handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before his death. Mick's voice shook as he read aloud, his siblings moving closer to hear every word. "To my children, Carl, Jennifer, and Mick. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found what I kept hidden all these years. I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it, but I hope you'll let me try to explain." Mick paused, taking a breath before continuing. "I met Evelyn Strand in the summer of 1973. I was 25, working at the county fair, and she was 23, beautiful and kind. We fell in love fast, the way young people do. By fall, she was pregnant. I wanted to marry her. I really did. But my father, your grandfather, had other plans. He'd arranged for me to meet Patricia Donovan. Her family owned land, had connections, could help me establish myself. My father made it very clear what was expected of me." Jennifer made a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Carl's jaw was clenched tight. "I was weak. I chose what seemed safe over what was right. I married Patricia in December of 1974, 8 months after Emma was born. But I never stopped loving Evelyn, and I never abandoned my daughter. I sent money. I visited when I could. As the years went on and your mother and I had you 3, it became harder to bridge the 2 lives. How could I tell you about Emma without destroying everything? How could I bring you all together without admitting what I'd done?" "So he just didn't," Carl muttered bitterly. Mick continued reading. "When your mother left in 1992, I thought about telling you then. But you were all dealing with so much pain already, and Emma's mother was sick. Evelyn died in 1995, and Emma was only 21. I couldn't abandon her then, not when she'd just lost her mother. So I kept visiting, kept the secret, kept both families separate. The letter went on, describing the impossible balance Robert had tried to maintain. Supporting Emma financially and emotionally while being present, or trying to be present, for his other 3 children. The weight of the secret growing heavier with each passing year. I know I failed all of you. Carl, you needed a father who could show you how to be vulnerable, not just successful. Jennifer, you needed someone who could teach you that it was okay to ask for help, that being strong didn't mean carrying everything alone. And Mick, you needed to see that mistakes don't have to define you, that it's possible to choose differently. Mick felt those words hit him like a physical blow. His own divorce, his own isolation, his own fear of connection. Was he just repeating his father's patterns? Emma is a good person. She became a nurse, she helps people, and she never once blamed me for the choices I made. She understood, or at least she pretended to. She deserves better than the life I gave her. Always on the outside, always the secret. The letter's final paragraph made Mick's breath catch. The cars in this garage, the Impala and the Duster, they're Emma's. I've been maintaining them for her, saving them for her. The title papers are in the glove box of the Impala, ready to be transferred. Emma's address is there too. If you're reading this, the choice is yours. You can find her, or you can let her remain in the past where I kept her. But please know that she's your sister, and she's alone, and she's worth knowing. I pray you choose better than I did. With love and regret, Dad. The silence after Mick finished reading was profound. He folded the letter carefully and set it down on the workbench, his hands steadier than he expected. The title papers, Jennifer said after a moment. He said they're in the Impala's glove box. Carl was already moving toward the car, pulling open the passenger door with more force than necessary. The glove compartment opened with a click, and he pulled out a stack of papers held together with a binder clip. Title papers for both cars, properly filled out but never submitted, and beneath them, a piece of notebook paper with an address written in their father's handwriting. Emma Rose Halden, 412 Maple Street, Millbrook, Carl read aloud. He looked up at his siblings. She's 47 miles away. We could be there in less than an hour. Should we call first? Jennifer asked. Give her some warning? What would we even say? Mick asked. Hi, you don't know us, but we're your half-siblings and our father just died. It's better than just showing up, Carl said. Is it? Mick countered. She's been the secret her whole life. Maybe she doesn't want to be found. They stood in the garage, none of them sure what to do next. Duke had finally ventured inside and was sitting at Mick's feet, leaning against his leg the way he did when he sensed his owner's distress. Mick looked down at the dog, at the cars, at the garage that had held his father's secrets for so long. Then he looked at his siblings. Really looked at them. Carl with his defensive anger barely concealing hurt. Jennifer with her tears and her need to fix things, to make them right, and himself, standing between them as always, trying to find the middle ground. We have to go, he said quietly. We have to at least try. What if she doesn't want to see us? Jennifer asked. Then she tells us that and we leave, Mick said. But Dad asked us to choose better than he did. That means not hiding, not running away. It means facing this. Carl nodded slowly. All right. But we do this right. We call first, give her the option to say no. Do we even have her phone number? Jennifer asked. They searched through the papers again. No phone number, but there was an email address scribbled on the back of one of Emma's letters, along with a note. In case you ever need to reach me quickly. I'll send her an email, Jennifer said, pulling out her phone. I'm good at this kind of thing. Teacher skills. She composed the message while Carl and Mick waited, showing it to them before sending. Dear Emma, you don't know us, but we're Robert Halden's children. Your half-siblings. We're Carl, Jennifer, and Mick. Our father passed away 4 days ago, and while going through his things, we discovered that you exist. We've read your letters and learned about your life. We're sorry we didn't know about you sooner. We understand if this is overwhelming or unwanted. But if you're willing, we'd like to meet you. We have some things that belong to you, things our father wanted you to have. Please let us know if you'd be open to meeting. With respect and hope, Jennifer, Carl, and Mick Halden. She read it aloud twice, making small adjustments, then looked at her brothers. Should I send it? Send it, Carl said. Jennifer hit send, and they all stood there staring at her phone as if Emma might respond immediately. Of course, she didn't. It was late morning on a Thursday. She was probably at work. It might be hours before she even saw the message. Now what? Carl asked. Now we wait, Mick said. And while we wait, we figure out what we're going to say if she agrees to meet us. They moved outside, away from the oppressive atmosphere of the garage. The August sun was high and hot, but at least there was air movement, a slight breeze that made the heat bearable. Duke immediately found a patch of shade and sprawled out, panting. Carl paced while Jennifer sat on the tailgate of Mick's truck. Mick leaned against the side of the vehicle, his mind racing through everything they'd discovered. We have a sister, Jennifer said, as if testing the words. I have another sister. I don't even know how to process that. She's older than you, Carl said. By a few months. That's weird to think about. She's younger than me, Mick added. By 2 years. They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Mick was thinking about all the times his father had been absent, all the family events he'd missed or attended half-heartedly. Now he knew where Robert Halden had been, with Emma. Living another life. Being another person. Do you think Mom knew? Jennifer asked suddenly. Carl and Mick both looked at her. About Emma, I mean. Do you think that's why she left? It was a question none of them had considered, but it made a terrible kind of sense. Patricia Halden had left with no explanation, no warning. One day she was there, and the next she was gone. She'd moved across the country, remarried within 2 years, and never looked back. They'd seen her only a handful of times in the 33 years since, and those visits had been strained and brief. Dad's letter said he met Evelyn before he married Mom, Carl said slowly. But Emma was born before the wedding. Maybe Mom found out. Maybe that's what drove her away. Or maybe she just couldn't live with a man who was always somewhere else, Mick suggested. Even if she didn't know about Emma specifically, she had to know Dad was disconnected. Distant. Jennifer's phone buzzed, making all 3 of them jump. She looked at the screen, her eyes widening. It's her, she said. Emma responded. They crowded around Jennifer as she opened the email. The response was brief. I'm in Millbrook. I'm home today. If you want to come, you can. 412 Maple Street. I'll be here. Emma. That was fast, Carl said. She's been waiting, Mick realized. All her life, probably. Waiting for us to find out. Waiting for someone to come looking. So we go, Jennifer said, standing up. Right now, we go. Who's driving? Carl asked. Mick looked at the garage, at the Impala visible through the open door. We take the cars, the ones Dad meant for Emma. We drive them to her. It's what he wanted. Carl nodded. I'll take the Impala. You 2 follow in the Duster. We'll caravan. They returned to the garage to get the keys. As they did, Mick noticed something he'd missed earlier. A small leather notebook tucked into the side pocket of the Impala's driver's seat. He pulled it out and flipped through it. A journal. His father's journal, with entries going back years. Found something else, he said, showing his siblings. But there was no time to read it now. Emma was waiting. Their sister was waiting. They would read it later. Right now, they had a choice to make, the same choice their father had faced decades ago. This time, they would choose differently. They spent 15 minutes getting the cars ready. Both started surprisingly easily despite sitting idle, further proof that their father had been maintaining them regularly, probably right up until his health failed. Carl adjusted the Impala's mirrors and seat while Mick did the same with the Duster. Jennifer chose to ride with Mick, and Duke, after some coaxing, agreed to lie down in the Duster's back seat. "You have the address?" Carl called from his window. Mick held up his phone, GPS already loaded. "Got it. 47 miles. Straight shot. We'll follow you." Carl pulled out of the garage first, the Impala's engine purring smoothly. Mick followed, and they left their father's property in a strange procession, two classic cars carrying three middle-aged people toward a meeting that should have happened decades ago. The drive was quiet. Jennifer stared out the window, lost in thought. Mick kept his eyes on the road, following Carl's taillights, his mind churning through everything they'd learned. Duke's steady breathing from the back seat was oddly comforting. "What do you think she's like?" Jennifer asked after a while. "I don't know," Mick admitted. "From her letters, she seems kind, understanding. She had every right to be angry at Dad, but she wasn't." "That doesn't mean she won't be angry at us," Jennifer pointed out. "We're the family he chose, the legitimate children. We had him, even if he wasn't really present. She was the secret he kept hidden." "We didn't know," Mick said. "That's not our fault." "But we're still the reason she was hidden," Jennifer said softly. "Our existence made her invisible." Mick didn't have an answer to that. She was right, in a way. If Robert Halden hadn't already had a family, the proper family that his father had pushed him toward, maybe Emma's life would have been different. Maybe she wouldn't have spent 50 years as a secret. They drove through farm country, past fields of corn and soybeans, past small towns with grain elevators and churches and tractor dealerships. The landscape was familiar, the Midwest in late summer, everything green and growing, the harvest still weeks away. Mick thought about his own daughter, Emily. He'd raised her alone after the divorce, and he'd tried to be present, to be involved in her life, but he knew there were times he'd failed. Times when he'd been too tired or too wrapped up in his own problems to really see her. She turned out well anyway, but not because of him. Despite him, maybe. Was that how Emma felt about their father? That she'd survived despite the situation rather than because of it? "I'm scared," Jennifer admitted. "Is that stupid? I'm scared to meet my own sister." "Not stupid," Mick assured her. "I'm scared too. Carl doesn't seem scared." "Carl's terrified," Mick said. "That's why he's being so controlled about everything. When Carl's scared, he gets organized." Jennifer smiled slightly. "You know us well." "I'm the middle child. It's my job to understand everyone else." They fell into silence again. Ahead of them, Carl took an exit off the highway, following the GPS directions toward Millbrook. The town appeared gradually. First a gas station and a fast food restaurant, then houses, then a proper main street with shops and a courthouse and a library. It was smaller than their hometown, maybe 5,000 people, with that neat, contained feeling of a place where everyone knew everyone else. The kind of town where newcomers were noticed and old families had been around for generations. "Turn left on Maple Street," the GPS announced. Carl signaled and turned. Mick followed. Maple Street was residential, lined with modest single-family homes, most of them from the 1950s or 60s, well-maintained with neat yards and mature trees providing shade. "In 500 feet, your destination will be on the right," the GPS said. Mick's heart was pounding now. Jennifer sat forward in her seat, gripping the dashboard, and then they were there. 412 Maple Street. Carl pulled the Impala to the curb in front of the house. Mick parked the Duster behind him. For a long moment, none of them moved. They just sat in the cars, staring at the house where their sister lived. It was a small bungalow, white with dark green shutters, probably built in the 1960s. The yard was tidy, with flower beds along the front walk, zinnias and marigolds still blooming in the summer heat. A front porch with 2 rocking chairs, a mailbox that said Halden in neat letters. She kept Dad's last name, Jennifer said. That detail hit Mick harder than he expected. Emma had kept their father's name, had claimed her identity as his daughter even though the world didn't acknowledge it, even though they, her half-siblings, hadn't known she existed. Carl got out of the Impala first, standing on the sidewalk and looking at the house. Mick and Jennifer joined him, Duke staying close to Mick's leg. The 3 of them stood there, a strange tableau of middle-aged uncertainty. The front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with shoulder-length brown hair showing strands of gray. She wore jeans and a simple blue shirt, and even from a distance, Mick could see the resemblance. She had their father's eyes, that same deep brown with amber flecks. His nose, his chin. Emma stood on the porch, her hands clasped in front of her, and looked at them. Her expression was unreadable. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Duke, in a move completely out of character for his normally reserved nature, pulled free from Mick's loose grip and trotted up the front walk. He climbed the porch steps and sat down directly in front of Emma, tail wagging, looking up at her with his gentle brown eyes. Emma looked down at the dog, and her face softened. She knelt slowly and reached out to pet Duke's head. The golden retriever leaned into her touch, and Mick saw Emma's shoulders shake slightly. She was crying. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, her voice carrying across the yard. "We didn't mean to just show up like this. I know who you are," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears. She stood, still petting Duke. "I've known who you were my whole life. Pictures, stories. I could probably tell you your birthdays, your favorite colors, the names of your children. Dad talked about you constantly." The statement hung in the air. Their father, who had been so distant with them, had talked about them to Emma, had shared their lives with her while keeping her existence hidden from them. "We just found out about you," Carl said, his voice rough. 4 hours ago, we were cleaning out the garage and we found everything, the letters, the photos, the birth certificate. The cars, Emma added, looking past them to the vehicles at the curb. He was keeping them for me. He told me about them. Said someday, when he was gone, maybe they'd bring you to me. "He wrote us a letter," Mick said. "Explaining, asking us to find you." Emma nodded slowly. "That sounds like him. Always better at writing things down than saying them out loud." Another silence, but this one felt different. Less awkward, more weighted with meaning. They were all taking measure of each other. These 4 people connected by blood, but separated by a lifetime of secrets. "Would you like to come in?" Emma asked finally. "I can make coffee. We have a lot to talk about, I think." "Yes," Jennifer said immediately. "Please." Emma opened the screen door wider, and Duke immediately trotted inside as if he owned the place. Emma smiled at that, a real smile that transformed her face. She looked younger when she smiled, and Mick realized she was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. They walked up the front path together, Carl first, then Jennifer, then Mick. As they climbed the porch steps, Emma stepped back to let them in, but her eyes kept moving from face to face, as if she couldn't quite believe they were real. "I thought about this moment for years," she said quietly. "Wondered what I'd say, what you'd say, whether you'd be angry or kind or indifferent." "We're not indifferent," Mick said. "I promise you that." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. "Come in, please. Welcome to my home." They stepped across the threshold into Emma's house, into the life their father had kept hidden, and Mick felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about discovering a secret. This was about discovering family. A sister they'd never known they had, who'd been waiting for them all along. The living room was cozy and lived in, with comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls, many of them showing Emma with their father, spanning decades. A life documented. A relationship real and substantial, even if it had existed in the shadows. "Sit anywhere," Emma said, gesturing to the couch and chairs. "I'll get the coffee started." "I'll help," Jennifer offered immediately. The two women disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Carl and Mick standing in the living room. Duke had already found the most comfortable spot on the rug and was settling in for a nap. Carl walked along the wall looking at the photos. Mick joined him. "That's her graduation from nursing school," Carl said, pointing to one. "And that's the county fair, from maybe 10 years ago." In the photo, Emma and their father stood in front of a Ferris wheel, cotton candy in hand, both smiling. Robert Halden looked relaxed, happy even. It was jarring to see their father, the man they'd known as distant and unavailable, looking so at peace. "He had a whole other life," Carl said quietly. "A whole other version of himself. And we never knew." "Maybe this was who he really was," Mick suggested. "Maybe with us, he was always carrying the guilt, but with Emma, he could just be himself." "That's not fair to us," Carl said. "No," Mick agreed. "It's not, but I don't think he knew how to be anything else." They could hear Emma and Jennifer talking in the kitchen, voices low and tentative, feeling each other out. In the living room, the two brothers stood among the evidence of their father's secret life and tried to understand. On the mantel, Mick noticed a framed newspaper clipping. He walked over to read it. "Local nurse receives excellence in cardiac care award." The photo showed Emma in scrubs, holding a plaque, smiling at the camera. Their sister was accomplished. She'd made something of herself despite growing up as a secret. Despite having a father who could only be present part-time. Despite everything. "She seems nice," Carl said grudgingly. "Yeah," Mick agreed. "She does." In the kitchen, Jennifer laughed at something Emma said, the sound tentative but real. It was a start. "We can't undo what Dad did," Mick said. "But maybe we can choose differently from here." Carl nodded slowly. "Maybe." From the kitchen, Emma called out, "Coffee's ready. Come sit down. We have 50 years to catch up on." They joined the women at Emma's kitchen table, and the real conversation began. They spent 15 minutes getting the cars ready. Both started surprisingly easily, despite sitting idle. Further proof that their father had been maintaining them regularly, probably right up until his health failed. Carl adjusted the Impala's mirrors and seat while Mick did the same with the Duster. Jennifer chose to ride with Mick, and Duke, after some coaxing, agreed to lie down in the Duster's back seat. "You have the address?" Carl called from his window. Mick held up his phone, GPS already loaded. "Got it. 47 miles, straight shot. We'll follow you." Carl pulled out of the garage first, the Impala's engine purring smoothly. Mick followed, and they left their father's property in a strange procession, two classic cars carrying three middle-aged people toward a meeting that should have happened decades ago. The drive was quiet. Jennifer stared out the window, lost in thought. Mick kept his eyes on the road, following Carl's taillights, his mind churning through everything they'd learned. Duke's steady breathing from the back seat was oddly comforting. "What do you think she's like?" Jennifer asked after a while. "I don't know," Mick admitted. "From her letters, she seems kind, understanding. She had every right to be angry at Dad, but she wasn't." "That doesn't mean she won't be angry at us," Jennifer pointed out. "We're the family he chose, the legitimate children. We had him, even if he wasn't really present. She was the secret he kept hidden." "We didn't know," Mick said. That's not our fault. But we're still the reason she was hidden, Jennifer said softly. Our existence made her invisible. Mick didn't have an answer to that. She was right, in a way. If Robert Halden hadn't already had a family, the proper family that his father had pushed him toward, maybe Emma's life would have been different. Maybe she wouldn't have spent 50 years as a secret. They drove through farm country, past fields of corn and soybeans, past small towns with grain elevators and churches and tractor dealerships. The landscape was familiar. The Midwest in late summer, everything green and growing, the harvest still weeks away. Mick thought about his own daughter, Emily. He'd raised her alone after the divorce, and he'd tried to be present, to be involved in her life. But he knew there were times he'd failed, times when he'd been too tired or too wrapped up in his own problems to really see her. She'd turned out well anyway, but not because of him. Despite him, maybe. Was that how Emma felt about their father? That she'd survived despite the situation rather than because of it? I'm scared, Jennifer admitted. Is that stupid? I'm scared to meet my own sister. Not stupid, Mick assured her. I'm scared too. Carl doesn't seem scared. Carl's terrified, Mick said. That's why he's being so controlled about everything. When Carl's scared, he gets organized. Jennifer smiled slightly. You know us well. I'm the middle child. It's my job to understand everyone else. They fell into silence again. Ahead of them, Carl took an exit off the highway, following the GPS directions toward Millbrook. The town appeared gradually. First a gas station and a fast food restaurant, then houses. Then a proper main street with shops and a courthouse and a library. It was smaller than their hometown, maybe 5,000 people, with that neat, contained feeling of a place where everyone knew everyone else. The kind of town where newcomers were noticed and old families had been around for generations. Turn left on Maple Street, the GPS announced. Carl signaled and turned. Mick followed. Maple Street was residential, lined with modest single-family homes, most of them from the 1950s or 60s, well-maintained with neat yards and mature trees providing shade. In 500 feet, your destination will be on the right, the GPS said. Mick's heart was pounding now. Jennifer sat forward in her seat, gripping the dashboard. And then they were there. 412 Maple Street. Carl pulled the Impala to the curb in front of the house. Mick parked the Duster behind him. For a long moment, none of them moved. They just sat in the cars, staring at the house where their sister lived. It was a small bungalow, white with dark green shutters, probably built in the 1960s. The yard was tidy, with flower beds along the front walk, zinnias and marigolds still blooming in the summer heat. A front porch with 2 rocking chairs, a mailbox that said Halden in neat letters. She kept Dad's last name, Jennifer said. That detail hit Mick harder than he expected. Emma had kept their father's name, had claimed her identity as his daughter even though the world didn't acknowledge it, even though they, her half-siblings, hadn't known she existed. Carl got out of the Impala first, standing on the sidewalk and looking at the house. Mick and Jennifer joined him, Duke staying close to Mick's leg. The 3 of them stood there, a strange tableau of middle-aged uncertainty. The front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with shoulder-length brown hair showing strands of gray. She wore jeans and a simple blue shirt, and even from a distance, Mick could see the resemblance. She had their father's eyes, that same deep brown with amber flecks, his nose, his chin. Emma stood on the porch, her hands clasped in front of her, and looked at them. Her expression was unreadable. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Duke, in a move completely out of character for his normally reserved nature, pulled free from Mick's loose grip and trotted up the front walk. He climbed the porch steps and sat down directly in front of Emma, tail wagging, looking up at her with his gentle brown eyes. Emma looked down at the dog, and her face softened. She knelt slowly and reached out to pet Duke's head. The golden retriever leaned into her touch, and Mick saw Emma's shoulders shake slightly. She was crying. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, her voice carrying across the yard. "We didn't mean to just show up like this. "I know who you are," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears. She stood, still petting Duke. "I've known who you were my whole life. Pictures, stories. I could probably tell you your birthdays, your favorite colors, the names of your children. Dad talked about you constantly." The statement hung in the air. Their father, who had been so distant with them, had talked about them to Emma, had shared their lives with her while keeping her existence hidden from them. "We just found out about you," Carl said, his voice rough. 4 hours ago, we were cleaning out the garage, and we found everything. The letters, the photos, the birth certificate. "The cars," Emma added, looking past them to the vehicles at the curb. "He was keeping them for me. He told me about them. Said someday, when he was gone, maybe they'd bring you to me. He wrote us a letter," Mick said, "explaining, asking us to find you." Emma nodded slowly. "That sounds like him. Always better at writing things down than saying them out loud." Another silence, but this one felt different. Less awkward, more weighted with meaning. They were all taking measure of each other, these 4 people connected by blood, but separated by a lifetime of secrets. "Would you like to come in?" Emma asked finally. "I can make coffee. We have a lot to talk about, I think." "Yes," Jennifer said immediately. "Please." Emma opened the screen door wider, and Duke immediately trotted inside as if he owned the place. Emma smiled at that, a real smile that transformed her face. She looked younger when she smiled, and Mick realized she was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. They walked up the front path together, Carl first, then Jennifer, then Mick. As they climbed the porch steps, Emma stepped back to let them in, but her eyes kept moving from face to face, as if she couldn't quite believe they were real. "I thought about this moment for years," she said quietly. "Wondered what I'd say, what you'd say, whether you'd be angry or kind or indifferent." "We're not indifferent," Mick said. "I promise you that." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. "Come in, please. Welcome to my home." They stepped across the threshold into Emma's house, into the life their father had kept hidden, and Mick felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about discovering a secret. This was about discovering family. A sister they'd never known they had, who'd been waiting for them all along. The living room was cozy and lived in, with comfortable furniture and family photos on the walls, many of them showing Emma with their father, spanning decades. A life documented. A relationship real and substantial, even if it had existed in the shadows. "Sit anywhere," Emma said, gesturing to the couch and chairs. "I'll get the coffee started." "I'll help," Jennifer offered immediately. The 2 women disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Carl and Mick standing in the living room. Duke had already found the most comfortable spot on the rug and was settling in for a nap. Carl walked along the wall, looking at the photos. Mick joined him. "That's her graduation from nursing school," Carl said, pointing to one. "And that's the county fair, from maybe 10 years ago." In the photo, Emma and their father stood in front of a Ferris wheel, cotton candy in hand, both smiling. Robert Halden looked relaxed, happy even. It was jarring to see their father, the man they'd known as distant and unavailable, looking so at peace. "He had a whole other life," Carl said quietly. "A whole other version of himself, and we never knew." "Maybe this was who he really was," Mick suggested. "Maybe with us he was always carrying the guilt, but with Emma he could just be himself." "That's not fair to us," Carl said. "No," Mick agreed. It's not, but I don't think he knew how to be anything else. They could hear Emma and Jennifer talking in the kitchen, voices low and tentative, feeling each other out. In the living room, the two brothers stood among the evidence of their father's secret life and tried to understand. On the mantel, Mick noticed a framed newspaper clipping. He walked over to read it. Local nurse receives excellence in cardiac care award. The photo showed Emma in scrubs, holding a plaque, smiling at the camera. Their sister was accomplished. She'd made something of herself despite growing up as a secret, despite having a father who could only be present part-time, despite everything. She seems nice, Carl said grudgingly. Yeah, Mick agreed. She does. In the kitchen, Jennifer laughed at something Emma said, the sound tentative but real. It was a start. We can't undo what Dad did, Mick said. But maybe we can choose differently from here. Carl nodded slowly. Maybe. From the kitchen, Emma called out, "Coffee's ready. Come sit down. We have 50 years to catch up on." They joined the women at Emma's kitchen table, and the real conversation began. Emma's kitchen table was small, round, and scarred from years of use. They sat around it with their coffee cups, 4 people connected by blood but strangers in every other way. Emma had put out cookies, store-bought but thoughtful, and Duke was under the table, his head resting on Emma's feet. "He likes you," Mick observed. "I'm good with animals," Emma said. "Part of the nursing thing, I guess. Staying calm, being gentle. Animals sense that. Dogs are better judges of character than people," Jennifer said. Emma smiled. "Dad always said that. He said—" She stopped, realizing what she'd said. "Sorry. I know this is strange. Talking about him like I knew him when you didn't really." "No," Carl said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Don't apologize. You did know him. Better than we did, apparently. Tell us, what was he like with you?" Emma took a sip of her coffee, considering. "Present," she said finally. "He was present, every other Sunday, like clockwork, unless he was sick or I was out of town. He'd drive up, we'd have lunch. Sometimes we'd just sit and talk. When Mom was alive, he'd visit with both of us. After she passed, it was just me, but he kept coming. For 30 years, Jennifer said softly. He kept that routine for 3 decades. More than that, Emma corrected. He started coming when I was a baby. 51 years of every other Sunday visits, until about 3 months ago when he got too sick to drive safely. The timeline aligned with their father's final decline. Heart problems, diabetes complications. He'd still been coming to see Emma even as his health failed. "What did you talk about?" Mick asked. Emma thought about it. Everything and nothing. He'd ask about my work, my life. I'd tell him about patients, about the hospital. He'd talk about his job at the hardware store, about the house, about... She paused. About you, all of you. He'd tell me what you were doing, what was happening in your lives. "How?" Carl asked sharply. "We barely spoke to him. How did he know what was happening with us?" "Facebook," Emma said simply. "He had an account under a fake name. He followed all of you, your kids too. He'd screenshot things and show me. Carl, he showed me pictures from your daughter's wedding 3 years ago. Jennifer, he was so proud when your son made the dean's list. And Mick, he talked about Emily constantly. Said she was doing amazing work as a designer." The revelation was stunning. Their father, who had seemed so disconnected from technology and modern life, had been secretly monitoring them online, learning about their lives through social media because they hadn't let him into their lives directly. "I didn't know he even knew what Facebook was," Jennifer said. "He learned," Emma said, "because he wanted to know you. Even if he couldn't be close to you, he wanted to know." The guilt that statement produced was palpable. They'd all kept their father at arm's length, assumed he didn't care. Meanwhile, he'd been watching from the shadows, caring more than they'd realized. "We weren't good to him," Mick admitted. After Mom left, we all kind of withdrew. We blamed him for her leaving, even though we didn't say it out loud. Did she know about me? Emma asked. Your mother. Is that why she left? The question hung in the air. Carl and Jennifer looked at Mick, who shrugged. We don't know, he said. She never told us why she left. Just packed up and moved to Arizona, remarried and barely looked back. We've wondered the same thing you're wondering. Dad's letter said he was weak, Emma said. That he chose the safe path over the right one. His father, your grandfather, pushed him to marry your mother instead of my mum. Grandfather was a bastard, Carl said bluntly. Controlling, manipulative. He ran Dad's life until he died. That's when Dad started visiting more regularly, Emma added. After your grandfather passed in 1995, he had more freedom then. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture of a man trapped by circumstances he'd created himself, trying to do right by everyone and failing at it. Tell us about your mother, Jennifer said gently. Evelyn. Emma's face softened. Mom was wonderful, patient, kind, understanding. She never spoke badly about Dad, even though she had every right to. She told me that people make choices, and some choices are hard, and we have to forgive them for being human. She sounds like a saint, Carl said. She was a librarian, Emma said, smiling. Worked at the county library for 40 years. She loved books, loved helping people find stories. When she got sick, lung cancer, never smoked a day in her life, Dad was there as much as he could be. He paid for her treatment, held her hand. He was there when she died. Were you angry? Jennifer asked. At him? At the situation? Emma considered the question carefully. When I was younger, yes. In high school especially. I'd see other kids with their dads at games, at graduations, and I'd wonder why mine couldn't be there publicly, why I was a secret. Mom would remind me that Dad was doing the best he could, that life isn't always fair, that some things can't be fixed, only endured. That's incredibly mature of her, Mick said. She didn't want me growing up bitter, Emma said. She wanted me to have a relationship with my father, even if it wasn't traditional. And I did. I had a good father, even if I couldn't claim him publicly. The contrast was stark and painful. Emma, who'd had so much less claim on their father, spoke of him with love and understanding. Carl, Jennifer, and Mick, who'd had the legitimate claim, spoke of him with distance and resentment. He left you the cars, Carl said, changing the subject perhaps because it was too painful to continue. The titles are in the Impala's glove box. They're yours. We brought them here for you. Emma's eyes widened. You drove them here? From the house? Seemed right, Mick said. Dad wanted you to have them. We're just delivering what's yours. Emma stood and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the two classic cars parked at her curb. Her hand went to her mouth. He spent years working on those, she said, her voice thick. He'd tell me about the restoration, show me pictures. The Impala was my birth year, 1974. No, wait, 1967. The Duster was closer, 1972. He said they represented... She stopped, composing herself. He said they represented the miles between us. Every Sunday he drove 47 miles to see me, and when he was gone, I could have the cars that made those journeys. It was poetic in a way that surprised Mick. Their father hadn't been a romantic man, or so they'd thought. But this gesture, saving these cars, maintaining them for decades, planning to give them to Emma, it was deeply romantic. There's something else, Jennifer said. She pulled out the bundle of letters they'd found, Emma's letters to their father, tied with the blue ribbon. We found these. We read some of them. I hope that's okay. Emma took the letters, holding them like they were precious. I wondered what he did with these. I wrote him for years, just to stay connected. They're beautiful, Jennifer said. You write well. Teach her genes, Emma said, smiling slightly. Mom loved words. She passed that on. Mick pulled out his phone. I have a question. In your letters, you mentioned seeing Dad at a graduation. Carl's daughter. You were there. Emma nodded. I've been to a lot of family events. Always in the background, always hidden. Funerals, weddings, graduations. Dad would tell me about them, and sometimes I'd go, just to see. Just to feel like I was part of the family, even if I couldn't be acknowledged. The revelation was gutting. Emma had been there, watching them live their lives, and they'd never known. Their father had known, of course, had probably looked for her in crowds, knowing she was watching from the periphery. That must have been hard, Jennifer said. It was what it was, Emma said with a shrug that was too casual to be genuine. I made peace with it a long time ago. But Mick could see that she hadn't, not really. How could she? How could anyone make peace with being a secret their entire life? You don't have to be a secret anymore, he said impulsively. We know now. We want to, if you're willing, we'd like to know you. Really know you. Emma looked at him, searching his face. Why? You don't owe me anything. I'm the mistake your father made before he had you. You're not a mistake, Jennifer said firmly. You're our sister, half-sister technically, but still. Family. Family that didn't know I existed until today, Emma pointed out. That's on Dad, Carl said. Not on us. We're here now. Emma sat back down at the table, the letters still clutched in her hands. I don't know what to do with this. I've spent 51 years being the secret, being on the outside. I don't know how to be anything else. Maybe we figure it out together, Mick suggested. They sat in silence for a moment, all of them processing. Then Emma's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her expression changed, became more closed, more guarded. Is everything okay? Jennifer asked. Emma hesitated, then said, It's just a reminder. I have an appointment tomorrow at the hospital. Nothing urgent. But something in her tone suggested otherwise. Mick exchanged glances with his siblings. They'd come here to deliver cars and meet their sister, but there was something Emma wasn't telling them. What kind of appointment? Jennifer asked gently. She had that teacher instinct, that ability to sense when someone was holding back. Emma looked at them, at these three strangers who were her family, and Mick could see her deciding whether to trust them with the truth. I'm sick, she said finally. Cancer. I've been in treatment for 6 months. The words fell like stones. The silence that followed Emma's announcement was absolute. Even Duke seemed to sense the change, lifting his head from Emma's feet to look at her with concerned brown eyes. What kind? Jennifer asked, her voice professional despite the shock on her face. Breast cancer, Emma said. Stage 3 when they found it. I've been doing chemotherapy, radiation. The prognosis is... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Uncertain. There's a good chance of remission, but it's serious. 6 months, Carl repeated. So you were already sick when Dad died? Emma nodded. I was supposed to go to the funeral. I wanted to, but I had a treatment that day and I was too weak afterward. I thought about calling you all, introducing myself, but... She gestured vaguely. What would I say? Hi, I'm your secret sister, and by the way, your father just died. You were dealing with cancer alone, Jennifer said, her eyes filling with tears. And grief. And you couldn't even go to your own father's funeral. I went to the cemetery later, Emma said, after everyone left. Said my goodbyes privately. It's what I'm used to. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke Mick's heart. This was Emma's normal, staying in the shadows, taking what scraps of connection she could get, never asking for more. Did Dad know? Mick asked. About the cancer? Yes, Emma said. I told him when I was diagnosed in February. He was already sick himself, but he wanted to help. He tried to send money for treatment, but I told him no. He'd already done enough. I have good insurance through the hospital. He was dying and you were sick, Carl said, his voice rough. Jesus Christ, the two of you going through all of that alone. Not entirely alone, Emma corrected gently. I have friends, co-workers, a good support system at the hospital. And Dad, well, we talked on the phone when he couldn't visit, right up until the end. Jennifer was openly crying now. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For not knowing, for not being there, for... Stop, Emma said, but kindly. You didn't know I existed. You can't apologize for that. And I'm managing. The treatment is working. My numbers are improving. I'm not giving up. What's your timeline? Carl asked. Always the practical one. Needing facts and figures. Treatment schedule, I mean. Chemo every 3 weeks. Radiation 5 days a week for 6 weeks, which just finished last week. Follow-up scans in 2 months to see if we've achieved remission. Emma recited it clinically, like she was discussing someone else's case. And if you have? Mick asked. If the scans are clear? Then ongoing monitoring, medication, regular checkups. Cancer is like that. You never really get the all clear, just longer and longer stretches between threats. They sat with that information, all of them processing. Mick found himself thinking about his father's final months. Robert Halden had known his daughter had cancer, had known she was fighting for her life while he was losing his own battle, had died knowing Emma was ill and alone, knowing that his other children didn't even know she existed. The burden of that knowledge must have been crushing. Is that why Dad wrote the letter? Jennifer asked. Because he knew you were sick and he wanted us to find you. Maybe, Emma said. He never said explicitly. But in our last conversation he told me... She stopped, her voice catching. He told me that he was sorry, that he'd failed me by keeping me secret, but maybe his death could fix what his life couldn't. I didn't understand at the time. Now I do. Their father's death had brought them together. It had been his final gift to Emma, a family to replace the one she'd lost. We're not going anywhere, Jennifer said firmly. You're not alone anymore. Whatever you need, we're here. You don't even know me, Emma protested. We want to, Jennifer insisted. We have 50 years to make up for. Emma looked overwhelmed, like she didn't know how to accept this sudden influx of family. Mick understood. She'd built a life around being solitary, around depending only on herself. Opening up to them meant risking rejection, risking more loss. What do you need right now? Mick asked practically. For treatment, for daily life. What would help? Emma hesitated. I don't know. I'm pretty independent. I've been managing. Managing isn't the same as thriving, Jennifer pointed out. Do you have help? Someone to drive you to appointments, to stay with you after treatment? I drive myself, Emma said, and I'm fine after. Just tired. The 3 siblings exchanged looks. They all knew that wasn't how it should work. Cancer treatment was brutal, and doing it alone was even worse. Not anymore, Carl said. From now on, one of us will take you to appointments. You shouldn't be driving yourself. I couldn't ask you to... You're not asking, Carl interrupted. We're offering. I've got a flexible schedule. I can rearrange things. So can I, Jennifer added. Summer break just ended, but I can take personal days, and weekends are free. I work from home mostly, Mick said. My schedule is flexible too. Emma looked at them like they were speaking a foreign language. Why would you do this? You just met me. Because you're our sister, Mick said simply. And because it's the right thing to do. Dad asked us to choose better than he did. This is us choosing. Emma's composure finally cracked. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of years of holding everything in, of being strong alone, of never having anyone to lean on. Jennifer was out of her chair instantly, pulling Emma into a hug. Carl looked uncomfortable, but stayed seated, his jaw working. Mick reached across the table and put his hand on Emma's arm, a silent offering of support. They stayed like that for several minutes, letting Emma cry out years of grief and loneliness and fear. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes with a napkin Jennifer handed her, she looked lighter somehow, unburdened. "I'm sorry," she said. Don't apologize," Jennifer said firmly. "You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to be overwhelmed. You're dealing with cancer and grief and 3 strangers showing up claiming to be family. That's a lot." "You're not strangers," Emma said. "That's what makes it so strange. I've known about you my whole life. I've seen pictures, heard stories. You're strangers who aren't strangers." "We're family who should have been family all along," Carl said. "Better late than never, I guess." It wasn't the most eloquent statement, but it was honest. That was something, at least. "Tell us about the appointments," Jennifer said, pulling out her phone. "When and where? We'll coordinate a schedule." "You're serious about this," Emma said, half statement, half question. "Completely," Mick confirmed. Emma took a breath, then gave them the details. Chemotherapy at St. Anne's Medical Center in Millbrook, every 3 weeks on Thursday mornings. Follow-up appointments with her oncologist, blood work, scans. Jennifer typed everything into her phone, already organizing. "I'll take the first appointment. When's the next one?" "Next Thursday," Emma said. "But you don't have to. I'll be here Wednesday night," Jennifer interrupted. "We'll go together Thursday morning." "Where do you usually go after? Home?" "Usually. I'm pretty tired after treatment." "Then I'll stay with you for the day," Jennifer decided. "Make sure you eat. Help with whatever you need." Emma looked like she wanted to protest but couldn't find the words. The idea of not being alone was clearly both appealing and terrifying. "What about the cars?" Carl asked, changing the subject perhaps to give Emma a break from the emotional intensity. "Do you want to keep them both? We can help you sort out the titles, get them transferred." "I don't know," Emma admitted. "I've never even driven them. Dad always said they were mine, but I figured it was just talk. I never really believed—" She stopped. "They're real. You really brought them here." "Come look," Mick said, standing. "They're right outside." They all moved to the front porch, Duke trailing along. The afternoon sun was lower now, casting long shadows across Emma's quiet street. The 2 classic cars gleamed at the curb, the cherry-red Impala and the powder-blue Duster, both pristine and beautiful. Emma walked down to them slowly, like she was approaching something sacred. She reached out and touched the Impala's hood, her fingers trailing across the smooth paint. "He spent hours on these," she said softly. "Every visit, he'd tell me about the progress. New chrome, engine work, interior restoration. It was like he was building something permanent, something that would last after he was gone." "He was building your inheritance," Jennifer said. "Your piece of him." Emma opened the Impala's door and slid into the driver's seat. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, and she closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of leather and time. "I can feel him here," she said. "It's like he's still—" She couldn't finish. They gave her a moment. This was grief, raw and fresh, for a father who had been both present and absent, both deeply loving and impossibly distant. When Emma finally emerged from the car, her eyes were dry but red-rimmed. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing these, for coming at all, for everything." "This is just the start," Mick said. "We're not disappearing. We're here now." "I'm still not used to that idea," Emma admitted. "But I'm glad. I'm really glad." They stood on the sidewalk in the late afternoon sun. 4 people connected by blood and secrets, and a dead man's final wish. It wasn't a perfect family reunion. It wasn't even a complete one. But it was real, and it was a beginning. Duke, sensing that the emotional intensity had passed, wandered over to a patch of grass and found an excellent stick. He brought it to Emma, tail wagging. She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and delighted. "He's sharing with me." "That means he loves you," Mick said. "Duke doesn't share his sticks with just anyone." Emma threw the stick, and Duke bounded after it joyfully. For a moment, watching the dog play in her yard, Emma looked genuinely happy. "Lighter." "Stay for dinner," she said impulsively. "Please, I have things I can cook, and I'd like to know you, really know you, if that's okay." "We'd love that," Jennifer said immediately. So they stayed. They went back inside, and while Jennifer and Emma cooked together in the kitchen, Mick and Carl sat in the living room and looked through the photo albums Emma brought out. Albums full of a life they'd never known, a history they'd been excluded from, their father's other life, documented and real. And as the evening stretched on and they talked and ate and began the long process of becoming a family, Mick realized that sometimes the hardest part wasn't discovering secrets, it was figuring out what to do with the truth once you found it. They were figuring it out, one awkward conversation at a time. They stayed at Emma's house until nearly 9 o'clock that evening. The conversation had flowed more easily as the hours passed, awkwardness giving way to genuine curiosity. Emma told stories about her childhood, about her mother Evelyn, about her career as a nurse. Carl talked about his business, his family. Jennifer shared stories about teaching, about her kids. Mick found himself talking about Emily, about Duke, about the quiet life he'd built after his divorce. It felt like stitching together pieces of a quilt, different fabrics, different patterns, but somehow creating something cohesive. As they prepared to leave, Jennifer wrote her phone number on Emma's kitchen whiteboard. "Text me if you need anything. I mean it. Any time, day or night." Carl added his number too, though his gesture was more gruff. "Same here. And I'm serious about the appointments. We'll work out a schedule." Mick programmed Emma's number into his phone. "I'm closer than the others. Only 45 minutes. If you need something quickly, call me." Emma walked them out to the cars, Duke trotting beside her like he'd known her for years. The street lights had come on, casting pools of warm light along Maple Street. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Emma said. "This morning I was alone. Tonight I have—" She gestured at them. "Family. Get used to it," Jennifer said, hugging her tightly. "We're not going anywhere." They said their goodbyes, got into the cars, Carl in the Impala, Mick and Jennifer in the Duster, and pulled away from the curb. Mick watched in the rear-view mirror as Emma stood on her front porch, waving, Duke sitting beside her. "She's keeping the dog, you realize," Jennifer said. Mick glanced at his sister. "What?" "Duke. He's already attached to her, and she needs him more than you do." Mick thought about that. It was true. Duke had bonded with Emma almost instantly, and Emma, facing cancer alone, could use a companion. But Duke was his dog, his constant companion since the divorce. "Let's see how it goes," he said non-committally. They drove in silence for a while, following Carl's taillights back toward the highway. It was full dark now, the rural roads empty and quiet. "That was a lot," Jennifer said finally. "Yeah. She's sick, Mick. Really sick. We're going to lose her right after finding her, aren't we?" "We don't know that," Mick said. "She said the treatment is working. People survive cancer every day." "People die from it too," Jennifer said quietly. They drove on. Mick's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Emily's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, kiddo," he answered. "Dad, where are you? I tried calling earlier and you didn't pick up." "Sorry, I was at the garage. The old house, clearing out Dad's things with Carl and Jennifer." "Oh." Emily's voice softened. "How'd that go?" Mick glanced at Jennifer, who nodded. Emily should know. She was part of this family, too. Actually, we found something. Someone. Em, you have an aunt you didn't know about. There was a long pause. What? It's a long story, but the short version is that Grandpa had another daughter, from before he married Grandma. We just met her today. Her name is Emma. Emma, his daughter repeated. I have an Aunt Emma. She's sick, Mick added, because Emily would want to know, would want the whole truth. Cancer. She's been in treatment. Oh my God, Dad. That's a lot. Yeah. Are you okay? The question surprised him. I think so. It's strange, but she seems nice. Kind. I think you'd like her. Does she know about me? She knows about all of us. Grandpa told her everything about our lives. She's been the secret, not us. Emily was quiet for a moment. That's sad. It is, Mick agreed. But maybe we can make it better going forward. Send me her contact info, Emily said. I'll reach out. Welcome her to the family properly. Mick smiled. That was Emily. Always reaching out, always including people. I will. Love you, kid. Love you too, Dad. The call ended, and Jennifer was smiling. She's a good person, your daughter. Yeah, Mick agreed. She is. They reached the highway and started the drive home. Mick's mind was full of the day's revelations, Emma, the cars, the letters, the cancer. It felt like too much to process, like trying to drink from a fire hose. But beneath the overwhelm was something else. Purpose, maybe. For years, he'd been drifting, working, existing, but not really living. Now there was Emma, who needed them. A sister who'd been alone her whole life. They could give her something she'd never had. They could choose differently than their father had. His phone buzzed with a text. Emma, thank you for today, for coming, for staying, for everything. I know this is strange and complicated, but I'm grateful. Sleep well. Mick showed the text to Jennifer, who smiled and typed a response on her own phone. They were about 15 minutes from home when Mick's phone rang again. Emma's name on the screen. That was fast, Jennifer joked. But when Mick answered, Emma's voice was wrong, tight, scared. Mick, I'm sorry to bother you, but can you come back? There's something I need to show you. Something I found in the duster. What is it? Just, please, can you come back? Mick looked at Jennifer, who'd heard Emma's voice through the car speakers. She nodded. We're on our way, Mick said. 20 minutes. He called Carl on the car's system. Emma needs us to come back. Something about finding something in the duster. Carl's voice was tight. I'll turn around. Meet you there. They reversed course, and the drive back to Millbrook felt longer than it had leaving. What could Emma have found? The glove box had been empty except for the title papers. The trunk had been clear when they'd checked earlier. When they pulled back onto Maple Street, Emma was standing on her porch, illuminated by the porch light. She looked shaken. They parked and hurried up the walk. What is it? Jennifer asked. What did you find? Emma held up a small plastic hospital bracelet. This was in the center console, under some papers. Mick took it, examining it in the porch light. Emma Halden, patient 47829, St. Anne's Medical Center, Oncology Ward. The date on the bracelet was 3 weeks old. Dad was here 3 weeks before he died, Emma said, her voice shaking. He drove all the way here, even though he could barely walk, and I was at a chemo appointment. I didn't know he was coming. I didn't get to see him. She was crying now, and Jennifer immediately pulled her into a hug. Carl and Mick stood silent, processing. Their father, dying himself, had made one more trip to Millbrook to see Emma, but she'd been at treatment, so he'd waited. He'd sat in the car, in the duster, the one he'd been restoring for her, and waited for her to come home from the hospital where she was fighting cancer. There's more, Emma said, pulling away from Jennifer and wiping her eyes. She led them into the house, to the kitchen table. Spread out there were papers from the duster's console, maintenance records, receipts, and something else. A journal. Small, leather-bound, with their father's handwriting. "He left it in the car," Emma said. "I think he meant for me to find it, or for someone to find it." Mick picked up the journal and opened it to a random page. The date was from 2 months ago. "Emma's counts are down again. The doctors are worried. I'm worried. She won't tell me how bad it is, but I can see it in her face. She's scared. My daughter is scared, and I can't protect her from this, can't fix it. All I can do is visit, and even that is getting harder. My heart is failing. We're both dying, just at different speeds." Mick's throat tightened. He flipped back to earlier entries. "Told Emma about the cars today. Explained that they're hers, that after I'm gone, the titles will transfer." She cried. "Said I'd already given her too much. She doesn't understand. She's the best thing I ever did. The only thing I did right. Carl, Jennifer, Mick, they got a broken man. A coward who couldn't face what he'd done. Emma got the version of me I wish I could have been for everyone." Jennifer was reading over his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. Carl stood rigid, his fists clenched. Mick flipped forward to an entry from a month before their father's death. "The kids don't know about Emma. They'll hate me when they find out. But maybe that's what I deserve. I've lived with this secret for 50 years. Maybe it's time it came out. Maybe my death can give them what my life couldn't. A complete family. Emma deserves siblings. She's been alone too long." And then the final entry, dated a week before Robert Halden died. "Drove to Millbrook today. Last time, probably. 2 weeks now. Emma was at treatment. I waited in the car, hoping she'd come out, that I could see her one more time. She didn't. Left her the journal, the bracelet I found at her house last visit. Want her to know I tried. Want the others to know I tried. We make our choices young and live with them old. I chose wrong, but Emma was never wrong. She was always right, and now she's sick and I'm dying and I can't protect her. I'm writing the letter tonight, to Carl, Jennifer, and Mick, telling them everything. They deserve the truth. Emma deserves family. I'm sorry I couldn't give her that sooner." Mick closed the journal slowly. The room was silent except for Jennifer's quiet crying. "He knew he was dying," Carl said finally. "He knew, and he used his last bit of strength to come here one more time. He left this for us to find," Emma said. "All of it. The journal, the letters, the cars. He orchestrated this. His death was meant to bring us together." It was a staggering realization. Their father had planned this, had known that only his death would force them to clean out the garage, to find the hidden drawer, to discover Emma. He'd set it all up like dominoes, knowing that when he fell, everything else would follow. "He loved you very much," Jennifer said to Emma. "More than we understood." "He loved all of you too," Emma countered. "He just didn't know how to show it. The guilt kept him distant." They stood in Emma's kitchen, the journal between them, and understood their father in a way they never had when he was alive. Robert Halden had been flawed, deeply so, but he'd also loved deeply and desperately, and had spent his life trying to do right by people he'd already wronged. "What do we do now?" Carl asked. Emma picked up the journal. "We honor what he wanted. We become a family, a real one. You're sick," Carl said bluntly. "You're facing cancer. We need to—" "We face it together," Emma finished. "That's what he wanted. For us to not be alone anymore. Any of us." Mick thought about his own isolation, his divorce, his tendency to retreat. Jennifer thought about her constant need to fix things, to hold everyone together. Carl thought about his anger, his need for control. They were all broken in their own ways, shaped by a father who'd loved them but couldn't show it, who'd made choices he couldn't undo. But now they had a choice too. They could retreat into their separate lives, or they could do what their father had asked. They could choose differently. "Thursday," Jennifer said. "I'll be here Wednesday night. We'll go to your appointment together." "I'll handle the car titles," Carl said. "Get them transferred properly. Make sure everything's legal." "I'm going to bring Duke by this weekend," Mick said. "See if you two want to make it permanent." Emma looked at them, these three people who were strangers and siblings simultaneously, and smiled through her tears. "Family," she said softly. "I've always wanted that." "You have it now," Mick said. "For better or worse." And standing in that kitchen, united by a dead man's final wish and a lifetime of secrets finally revealed, they began the hard work of becoming what they should have been all along. The days between that first meeting and Emma's next chemotherapy appointment moved quickly. Jennifer kept her promise, arriving at Emma's house Wednesday evening with an overnight bag and a determination to make good on their commitment. Mick called Emma every other day, just checking in. Their conversations were tentative at first. What do you say to a sister you've just discovered? But gradually became more natural. Emma told him about her work, about being a cardiac nurse, about the patients she'd helped over the years. Mick told her about Emily, about his job coordinating freight routes, about the quiet life he'd built. Carl was less emotional in his approach, but no less committed. He handled the paperwork for the car titles, navigated the bureaucratic maze to get everything transferred legally. He also called Emma's insurance company, verified her coverage, and offered to cover any gaps. Emma protested, but Carl was insistent. "That's what family does," he said simply. Emily had reached out too, sending Emma a long email introducing herself and welcoming her to the family. Emma had responded, and the two had started a correspondence that surprised Mick with its immediate warmth. But beneath the surface of these new connections, there was tension. Emma's appointment was approaching, and none of them quite knew what to expect. Cancer treatment was brutal. They all knew that intellectually. But knowing and witnessing were different things. Wednesday evening, Jennifer called Mick from Emma's house. "How's she doing?" he asked. "Nervous," Jennifer admitted. "She's putting on a brave face, but I can tell. Tomorrow's going to be hard." "How are you doing?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "I'm scared, Mick. What if the treatment isn't working? What if we found her just in time to lose her?" "Don't think like that," Mick said, though he'd had the same thought. "We take it one day at a time." "Dad would have been doing this," Jennifer said softly. "If he'd lived. He'd be taking her to appointments, staying with her. We're doing what he would have done." "We're doing what he should have let us do years ago," Mick corrected. Thursday morning arrived grey and overcast, threatening rain. Mick thought about Jennifer and Emma, probably already on their way to St. Anne's Medical Center. He tried to work, to focus on routing schedules and delivery windows, but his mind kept drifting. Carl called around 10. "Have you heard from Jennifer?" "Not yet. They're probably still at the hospital." "This is harder than I expected," Carl admitted. "The waiting? The not knowing?" "Yeah." They stayed on the phone in silence for a while, two brothers connected by concern for a sister they barely knew but already cared about deeply. Jennifer finally called at 1 in the afternoon. Mick answered immediately. "How'd it go?" "It's done," Jennifer said, and she sounded exhausted. "She's resting now. Mick, it was—" Her voice cracked. "It was awful, watching her go through that. She was so brave, but I could see how much it cost her. Is she okay?" "She will be. She's tough. Tougher than I realized. But she's wiped out. I'm going to stay with her tonight, too. Make sure she's all right." "Tell her we're thinking about her," Mick said. "I will. And Mick?" She asked about Duke. She wanted to know when you were bringing him by. Mick looked down at the golden retriever sleeping at his feet. This weekend. Tell her this weekend. Friday, Emma called him directly. Her voice was weak but determined. Jennifer told me you're bringing Duke this weekend. If you're up for it, Mick said. No pressure, you need to rest. I want to see him, Emma said. I want to see you, all of you if possible. I've been thinking about Dad, about the journal, about everything. I want to show you something. What? You'll see. Can you come Saturday? Bring Carl and Jennifer too. They agreed to meet at Emma's house Saturday afternoon. Mick spent Friday evening wondering what Emma wanted to show them. More secrets? More revelations? Saturday morning, he packed Duke into the truck along with the dog's bed, bowls and toys. If Emma wanted to keep Duke, and Mick suspected she did, he wanted to make the transition easy. You're going to have a new home, buddy, he told the dog, with someone who needs you more than I do. Duke just looked at him with those soulful brown eyes, trusting and loyal. Carl and Jennifer were already there when Mick arrived. Emma looked tired, her skin pale and her movements careful, but she smiled when Duke bounded up to her, tail wagging furiously. Hey, beautiful boy, she said, kneeling to hug the dog. Duke licked her face enthusiastically, making her laugh. They gathered in Emma's living room. She'd laid out papers on the coffee table, documents, photos, more of their father's journal entries. I've been reading through everything, Emma said, all of Dad's journals, all his letters, and I found something I think you need to see. She handed them a letter addressed to their mother, Patricia Halden. The envelope was yellowed with age, postmarked 1992, the year their mother had left. Dad never sent this, Emma explained. I found it tucked in one of his journals. I think he wrote it and then couldn't bring himself to mail it. Carl opened the envelope carefully and pulled out several handwritten pages. He read silently for a moment, then began reading aloud. Patricia, I know you've made your decision, and I can't say I blame you. 25 years of marriage and I gave you half a man. Less than half. You deserved better than someone who was always somewhere else, even when I was standing right next to you. You were right when you said I'd never really been yours. I've been carrying Emma, carrying Evelyn, with me our entire marriage. I thought I could do both. I thought I could be a husband to you and a father to Emma. But you can't split yourself in two and give anyone the whole. I failed you. I failed the kids. I failed Emma. I failed everyone. Carl paused, his voice thick. Jennifer was crying quietly. Mick felt his own eyes burning. Carl continued. You asked me once if I loved you. I did. I do, but not the way you deserved. Not with everything I had. Part of me was always 47 miles away, with a little girl who called me Dad and a woman I should have married. I made my choice in 1974, and it was the wrong one. But it was made, and I couldn't unmake it without destroying more lives. So I lived with it. We all lived with it. Now you're leaving, and I understand. But I want you to know that my failures as a husband had nothing to do with your worth as a wife. You were good to me, good to our children. You deserved a man who could be fully present, and I never was. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. Robert. The letter ended. Carl set it down slowly. She knew, Jennifer said. Mom knew about Emma. Maybe not the details, but she knew Dad was never fully there. Do you think that's why she left? Carl asked. Because of this? Maybe, Emma said. Or maybe it was just the culmination of 25 years of living with someone who was emotionally absent. Dad blamed himself, clearly, but Mom made her choice too. She chose to leave rather than fight for the marriage. Can you blame her? Jennifer asked. Living with that kind of distance, that kind of emotional abandonment? No, Emma said. I don't blame her. I don't blame anyone. These are just choices. People making choices and living with consequences. Mick picked up the letter, reading it again more carefully. His father's handwriting, his father's words, his father's pain, all of it hidden, never sent, never resolved. He carried this guilt his whole life, Mick said. Every day, every decision, colored by this original choice. No wonder he was the way he was. We all carry our choices, Emma said quietly. I chose to accept being a secret. Mom chose to leave. Dad chose to live two lives. You three chose to keep him at distance. We all made choices. What choice are we making now? Carl asked. Emma looked at them. That's what I wanted to talk about. I've been thinking about the scans in 2 months, about what happens if... She paused, choosing her words carefully. If the news isn't good, if the cancer isn't responding the way we hope. Don't talk like that, Jennifer said immediately. I have to, Emma insisted. I have to be realistic, and if the worst happens, I need to know, are you going to be here? Not just now, while everything is new and dramatic, but later, through the hard parts, through the scary parts. The question hung in the air. It was fair, Mick thought. They'd appeared in her life suddenly, made promises, but Emma had no reason to trust that they'd stay. Their father had loved her, but kept her hidden. How did she know they wouldn't do the same, claim connection but fade away when things got difficult? I'll be here, Jennifer said firmly. Whatever happens. You're my sister. That's not conditional. Same, Carl added. I don't make promises I can't keep. I'm in this. Mick looked at Duke, who'd settled at Emma's feet like he'd been there forever. Then he looked at Emma, this sister he'd known for less than a week but who already felt essential. I'm not good at relationships, he admitted. I tend to withdraw when things get hard, but I'm tired of repeating Dad's patterns. I'm tired of choosing isolation over connection. So yeah, I'm here, for the long haul. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, all of you. I've spent my whole life being optional. The daughter who could be hidden, the relationship that could be secret. I need to know I'm not optional anymore. You're not, Jennifer said, pulling Emma into a hug. You're permanent. You're family. Carl cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the emotion but trying. What do you need? Practically speaking, for the next 2 months, for the scans, for whatever comes after. Emma pulled back from Jennifer, wiping her eyes. Company, mostly. The treatment makes me tired, but the isolation is harder than the physical effects. Having people around helps. Done, Jennifer said. We'll set up a schedule. Make sure someone's checking on you regularly. And I think Duke should stay here, Mick said. Permanently. He's clearly chosen you. Emma looked down at the dog, who gazed back at her with complete adoration. Are you sure? He's your dog. He's where he needs to be, Mick said. Besides, it'll give me an excuse to visit regularly. Check on both of you. Emma laughed, then winced, pressing her hand to her side. The movement was small, but Mick noticed. So did Jennifer. Are you in pain? Jennifer asked. Just sore from treatment, Emma said. It'll pass. But Mick saw Carl exchange a look with Jennifer. They were all thinking the same thing. Emma was putting on a brave face, but she was suffering more than she let on. What else? Carl asked. What else can we do? Emma thought about it. Tell me about your lives. Really tell me. I've heard Dad's version, seen pictures online, but I want to hear from you. I want to know who you are. So they talked. For hours, they sat in Emma's living room and told stories. Carl talked about building his business from nothing, about his daughter's recent wedding, about his fears that he'd become too focused on success and missed out on real connection. Jennifer talked about teaching, about her students, about the satisfaction of helping kids discover their own potential. Mick talked about Emily, about the divorce that had nearly broken him, about slowly rebuilding a life that felt meaningful. And Emma listened, asked questions, laughed at funny stories, and cried at sad ones. She was fully present in a way their father never had been, engaged and curious and warm. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Mick realized something. They'd come here to give Emma something: family, support, connection. But she was giving them something too, a chance to be better than they'd been, a chance to choose differently than their father had chosen. Emma was teaching them how to be a family, and she was doing it while fighting for her life. "I'm glad you found me," Emma said as the evening wound down. "I know the circumstances aren't ideal, Dad dying, me being sick, but I'm glad. I've waited my whole life to not be a secret, to just be." "Our sister," Jennifer finished. "You're our sister, and we're not going anywhere." Duke, sensing the emotional tone, got up and placed his head in Emma's lap. She stroked his ears gently, and the dog sighed contentedly. "He's staying," Mick confirmed. "He's yours now." "Thank you," Emma whispered, "for all of this, for choosing to be here." "We're the ones who should be thanking you," Carl said gruffly, "for giving us a chance, for not being angry at us, for not knowing." "How could I be angry?" Emma asked. "You didn't know I existed. That was Dad's choice, not yours." They left as darkness fell, leaving Duke with Emma. The golden retriever watched them go but stayed at Emma's side, his new place established. Driving home, Mick felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, not just for Emma's health, though he hoped for that desperately, but hope for himself, for his siblings, for this strange new family they were building from the ruins of their father's secrets. They had 2 months until Emma's scans. 2 months to be the family she'd never had. 2 months to prove that they meant what they said. 2 months to choose differently than their father had chosen. And they would. Whatever came after those scans, whatever the future held, they would face it together. For the first time in their lives, the Halden siblings were truly a family. All 4 of them. The 2 months passed in a strange blur of normalcy and anticipation. Jennifer drove to Millbrook every Thursday for Emma's chemotherapy appointments, staying overnight to help with the aftermath. Carl handled the practical matters: bills, insurance, organizing medical records. Mick visited on weekends, often bringing Emily along so the two could get to know each other. Duke thrived in his new home, becoming Emma's constant companion. The dog seemed to sense when she was having bad days, staying close and offering comfort without being asked. Emma said having him made the house feel less empty, made the fear more manageable. They fell into a rhythm, this makeshift family. Sunday dinners at Emma's house became a tradition. Carl would drive up from the city. Jennifer would bring her famous lasagna. Mick and Emily would arrive with dessert. They'd eat and talk and laugh, and slowly the awkwardness faded. They were becoming something real. But beneath it all was the countdown. Every day brought them closer to the scans that would determine Emma's future. They didn't talk about it much, but it was always there, a shadow at the edge of every conversation. October arrived with cool temperatures and falling leaves. Emma's last chemotherapy treatment was scheduled for the first week of the month. The scans would follow 2 weeks later. The final treatment hit Emma harder than the others. Jennifer called Mick from the hospital, her voice tight with worry. "She's really struggling. They had to slow the infusion because her blood pressure dropped. The oncologist says it's normal, but Mick, she looks so weak." "I'm coming," Mick said immediately. "I'll be there in an hour." He made the drive in 45 minutes, breaking every speed limit. Jennifer met him in the hospital parking lot, and they walked to the oncology wing together. Emma was in a recliner by a window, an IV in her arm, her eyes closed. She looked small, fragile, her skin pale and her head covered with a knit cap that hid her hair loss. Duke lay at her feet. The hospital had granted special permission for him to be there as a therapy dog. Mick sat in the chair next to her. Emma's eyes opened slowly. "You didn't have to come," she said, her voice weak. "Yeah, I did," Mick said. "That's what brothers do." She smiled faintly. "Brothers? I'm still getting used to having those." The nurse came over to check Emma's vitals, nodded satisfaction, and adjusted something on the IV pump. "Almost done," she told Emma. 30 more minutes." Those 30 minutes felt eternal. Mick held Emma's hand, while Jennifer sat on her other side. They didn't talk much. Emma was too tired. But the presence was what mattered, not being alone. When the treatment finally finished, Emma stood on shaky legs. Mick immediately moved to support her, and together they walked slowly to the parking lot. Jennifer had brought Emma's car, the powder blue duster that their father had restored, and Mick helped Emma into the passenger seat. "I'm driving," he said when Emma started to protest. "Jennifer will follow in my truck." They made the short drive to Emma's house in silence. Duke sat in the back seat, his head resting on Emma's shoulder through the gap between the seats. Once home, Mick helped Emma to the couch, while Jennifer went to get water and medication. Emma closed her eyes, exhausted. 2 more weeks, she said quietly. "Then we'll know." "You're going to beat this," Mick said, with more confidence than he felt. "Maybe," Emma said, "or maybe I won't. Either way, I'm glad I got these 2 months. Glad I got to know you all. That's worth something." "Don't talk like that," Jennifer said, returning with pills and water. "You're going to be fine. The treatment is working." "We don't know that yet," Emma said gently. "And that's okay. I've made peace with it." But Mick hadn't. None of them had. The thought of losing Emma now, after just finding her, was unbearable. Over the next 2 weeks, they took turns staying with Emma. She was weak, sleeping most of the day, but slowly regaining strength as the chemo worked its way out of her system. Carl took time off work, unprecedented for him, and spent 3 days just sitting with Emma, reading to her, keeping her company. The bond between them deepened in that time. Emma told stories about their father that they'd never heard, small, intimate moments that revealed a man they'd never really known. And they told her about their lives, about their struggles and fears and hopes. The night before the scans, all 4 of them gathered at Emma's house. Nobody said it was a vigil, but that's what it was. A family waiting together for news that would change everything. Emma sat in her favorite chair, Duke at her feet, and looked at her siblings. "Whatever happens tomorrow—" "Don't," Jennifer interrupted. "We're not doing goodbyes. You're going to be fine." "Jennifer's right," Carl said. "You've been through hell. You've fought hard. The scans are going to show that it worked." "And if they don't?" Emma asked quietly. "Then we deal with it," Mick said. "Together. That's what family does." Emma nodded, accepting that. They stayed up late, talking about nothing and everything, holding on to these hours before the knowing. When morning came, grey and cold, they drove together to St. Anne's Medical Center. Emma checked in, and they waited in the oncology wing's waiting room while she underwent the scans, CT, PET, blood work. Hours passed. Finally, Emma emerged, looking drained. "They'll have results by afternoon. Dr. Chen wants to see me at 3. 3 o'clock. The moment of truth. They took Emma home, fed her lunch though she barely ate, and tried to distract her with conversation and television. But the clock kept ticking toward 3, and there was no avoiding what was coming. At 2:30, they loaded back into the cars and drove to the medical center for the final time. Dr. Chen, Emma's oncologist, was a small woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She ushered them all into her office. Emma had insisted her siblings be there for the results. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Chen said, sitting behind her desk. She had a folder in front of her, and Mick couldn't read her expression. Emma reached out and took Jennifer's hand on one side, Mick's on the other. Carl stood behind them, his hand on Emma's shoulder. They were a unit, a family. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Dr. Chen opened the folder and looked at Emma with an expression that was impossible to interpret. "I have your scan results," she said. The world seemed to hold its breath. Dr. Chen looked at each of them before settling her gaze on Emma. "Your scans show significant improvement. The tumors have shrunk considerably. We're seeing no new growth, no metastasis. Emma, you're in remission." The words took a moment to register. Emma's grip on Mick's hand tightened painfully. "Remission," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes," Dr. Chen said. And now she was smiling. "The chemotherapy and radiation were successful. We caught it in time and your body responded well to treatment. You're not out of the woods entirely. We'll need regular monitoring, ongoing medication, follow-up scans every 3 months for the first year. But as of today, you're cancer-free." Jennifer made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Carl's hand on Emma's shoulder trembled. Mick felt tears running down his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. Emma couldn't finish. She was crying too hard, her whole body shaking with the release of 2 months of fear and uncertainty. Dr. Chen gave them a moment, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "This is what we hoped for, Emma. You did everything right. You fought hard." "I had help," Emma managed, gesturing at her siblings. "I had them." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding. "Family makes all the difference. Research shows that patients with strong support systems have better outcomes. You 3, she indicated Mick, Jennifer, and Carl. You probably helped save her life." They sat in that office for another 20 minutes while Dr. Chen went over the details. Medication schedules, lifestyle recommendations, warning signs to watch for. But Mick barely heard any of it. All he could think was that Emma was going to live. They'd found her just in time. Their father's death had brought them together, and being together had helped save Emma's life. Walking out of the hospital felt surreal. The October sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emma stood on the front steps of St. Anne's and just breathed deep and full, like she was tasting air for the first time. "I'm alive," she said wonderingly. "I'm really alive." "You're really alive," Jennifer echoed, pulling Emma into a fierce hug. "You're going to be okay." Carl, never comfortable with big emotional displays, cleared his throat roughly. "We should celebrate. Dinner. My treat. Somewhere nice." "I'd like that," Emma said. "But can we go home first? I need to call someone." They drove back to Emma's house in convoy, and once inside, Emma went to the mantel and picked up a framed photo. Their father, Robert Halden, smiling at the camera. "I need to tell him," she said quietly. "I know that sounds crazy, but..." "It doesn't sound crazy," Mick said. "He'd want to know." Emma held the photo close. "Dad, I made it. The scans are clear. I'm going to be okay." Her voice broke. "I'm going to be okay, and I'm not alone anymore. You gave me that, your last gift. Thank you." They gave her privacy for that moment, stepping back into the kitchen. Duke padded over to Emma and sat beside her, offering wordless comfort the way only dogs can. When Emma rejoined them, her eyes were red, but her smile was genuine. "Okay, let's celebrate." They went to a steakhouse in Millbrook. Nothing fancy, but good and welcoming. The staff knew Emma. She'd been a nurse at the local hospital for years, and word of her remission spread quickly. By the time dessert arrived, half the restaurant had stopped by their table to congratulate her. "You're loved here," Jennifer observed. "Really loved." "This town is my home," Emma said. "These people, they've been my family when I couldn't claim my real one. They got me through a lot." "You have both now," Carl said. "This community and us. Multiple families." Emma raised her water glass. "To family, all kinds." They clinked glasses. Water for Emma, wine for the others, and Mick felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was what their father had wanted. This moment, this connection, this family united instead of divided. Over dinner, they made plans. Thanksgiving at Emma's house, her first family Thanksgiving. Christmas rotating between homes. Regular Sunday dinners. Emma's follow-up appointments that they'd attend together. "What about the cars?" Carl asked. "You still have both. Do you want to sell one?" Emma thought about it. "I want to keep the Duster. That's the one Dad drove to see me, right? The Impala..." She paused. "Maybe we share it. A family car. Something we all have access to." "I like that," Jennifer said. "A tangible reminder that we're connected." The evening stretched long and easy. They talked and laughed and made more plans. Emily called to check on the scan results and cried happy tears when Mick told her. She promised to visit the following weekend. Walking Emma to her door later that night, Mick felt lighter than he had in yours. "Thank you," Emma said, "for everything, for showing up, for staying, for being here." "Thank you for letting us," Mick countered, "for giving us a chance to be better than we were." Emma hugged him, and Mick realized this was what he'd been missing his whole life. Not romantic love, which he'd had and lost, but this, fraternal love, family bonds, people who showed up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. "See you Sunday?" Emma asked. "Sunday," Mick confirmed, "and every Sunday after that." Duke barked from inside, and Emma laughed. "He's bossy, wants his dinner." "He's your dog now," Mick said. "He chose well." Driving home that night, Mick thought about his father, about the choices Robert Halden had made, the secrets he'd kept, the pain he'd caused, but also about the gift he'd given them in the end. By dying, by leaving behind clues to find Emma, their father had done what he couldn't do in life. He'd brought his family together. It wasn't a perfect story. There was still hurt to work through, grief to process, years of absence to somehow reconcile. But it was a start, and sometimes a start is enough. 6 months later, on a warm April afternoon, the Halden family gathered at their father's grave. Emma stood at the headstone, Duke at her side, and looked at the simple marker, Robert James Halden, 1947 to 2025, beloved father. They'd had that last part added after discovering Emma. He'd been beloved in his complicated way. "We brought someone to meet you, Dad," Emma said softly. She turned and gestured, and Emily approached, Mick's daughter who'd flown in from Portland for the occasion. They'd decided to do this together, all 4 siblings plus Emily, who was technically the first of the next generation to bridge the gap. Emma's first Easter with her family, and they'd chosen to spend part of it here, at the cemetery, acknowledging the man who'd brought them together. "Tell him," Jennifer encouraged. Emma took a breath. "Dad, I'm still in remission. 6 months and counting. The doctors are optimistic, and I'm not alone anymore. You made sure of that." She paused, composing herself. "Carl's daughter Sarah wants to meet me. She's coming to visit next month, and Jennifer's kids are planning a summer trip here. Mick's Emily. You'd be so proud of her. She's brilliant and kind, just like you always told me she was." Carl stepped forward, awkward as always with emotion, but trying. "You were right, Dad. Emma is the best of us. We're lucky to know her. I wish..." He stopped, started again. "I wish we'd had more time, that you'd trusted us enough to tell us, but I'm trying to let go of that anger. We're building something good. That's what matters now." Jennifer placed flowers on the grave, yellow roses that Emma had, said were their father's favorite. "We're having Sunday dinners at Emma's house, all of us. It's become a tradition. The house is always full of people and laughter and Duke causing chaos." She smiled through tears. "It's what you wanted for Emma, and you're giving us what we didn't know we needed." a real family. Mick was last. He knelt by the headstone, running his fingers over his father's name. I understand you better now, the impossible choices, the guilt you carried. I still think you handled it wrong, keeping Emma's secret all those years. But I'm trying to forgive, for Emma's sake and for mine. We're breaking the cycle, Dad, the isolation, the emotional distance. With Emma, we're learning how to actually be present for each other. Emily added, I never met you, Grandpa, but through Aunt Emma, I feel like I'm getting to know you. The real you. Thanks for the gift of family. They stood together in the spring sunshine, 5 people connected by one man's complicated legacy. The cemetery was peaceful, the only sound the wind in the trees and Duke's contented panting. Should we tell him the rest? Emma asked, smiling. Tell him, Carl encouraged. Emma turned back to the grave. We're keeping the house, Dad. Your house. Carl wanted to sell it, but we talked him out of it. We're turning it into a family gathering place. Renovating the main house, keeping the garage as it was. A reminder of where this all started. Emma Halden Memorial Family Home, we're calling it. Named after Mom. She deserves to be remembered too. It had been Jennifer's idea, and Emma had loved it immediately. The mother who'd been hidden would now have her name on a place where family gathered. A small justice, but meaningful. They spent another half hour there, talking to their father, telling him about their lives, sharing the small moments and big milestones. It felt right, including him even in death. He'd been absent in life, but his death had brought healing. Leaving the cemetery, they caravanned back to Emma's house for Easter dinner. The small bungalow on Maple Street had become their center, the place they all returned to, the home that welcomed them. Emma had painted the shutters a brighter green, planted more flowers, made the space even more inviting. Inside, the house smelled like ham and fresh bread. Jennifer had cooked, with Emma supervising from a chair. Her strength was returning, but she still tired easily. The doctors said that was normal, that full recovery could take a year or more. They ate at Emma's extended table. She'd bought a bigger one to accommodate everyone. Duke begged shamelessly for scraps. They talked and laughed and told stories, and Mick looked around and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was family. Messy and imperfect, and sometimes awkward, but real. Authentic in a way his life hadn't been for years. After dinner, Carl pulled out a folder. I have something for everyone. He distributed papers, legal documents they'd all signed. The deed to their father's property, now transferred to all 4 siblings as equal owners. The title to the Impala, officially registered as shared property. Documents establishing a family trust to maintain the property and provide for Emma's ongoing medical care if needed. We're officially in this together, Carl said. Legally, financially, permanently. No more secrets, no more hiding. We're a family, documented and real. Emma looked at the papers, then at her siblings. I never thought I'd have this. I spent 50 years as a secret, and now I'm... She gestured at the documents. Official. You always were, Jennifer said firmly. Dad's failure to acknowledge it doesn't change the reality. You were always a Halden. Now the paperwork just matches the truth. As evening fell and they moved to the living room, Emily asked the question they'd all been avoiding. What would you tell him? If Dad was here right now, what would you say? They sat quietly, considering. Emma answered first. I'd tell him I forgive him, and I'd thank him for giving me all of you. I'd tell him I'm sorry, Jennifer added. Sorry we weren't more open to him when he was alive. Sorry we kept him at arm's length. I'd tell him I get it now, Carl said. The impossible choices. I'd tell him I'm trying to make different ones. Mick thought carefully before speaking. I'd tell him that his death gave us life. Not just Emma's life, saved by having family support through cancer, but all our lives. We were all living half-lives before, isolated and disconnected. He brought us together. His last act was his best one. They sat with that truth as darkness settled outside and Duke snored softly on his bed. The house was warm, full of family, full of love. Outside, the cherry-red Impala and powder-blue Duster sat in the driveway, monuments to a man's complicated love, to journeys taken and distances crossed. Robert James Halden had lived a divided life and died alone, but his death had created something he'd never managed in life, a united family, present for each other, choosing connection over isolation. "To Dad," Emma said, raising her coffee cup. "Who taught us how to live by showing us how not to?" "To Dad," they echoed. And in that moment, in Emma's living room on a spring evening, the Halden family was finally complete. 4 siblings who'd found each other too late and just in time, learning to love and forgive and choose each other every single day. It wasn't the family any of them had expected, but it was the family they'd chosen, and that made all the difference. The end.